You'll be in row 14 next to the service area, the wedding coordinator announced, clipboard in hand, her voice as flat as yesterday's champagne. My daughter-in-law Vivian smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind that says, I've already won. My family will lose face if your situation shows. She added, her gaze sliding over my navy dress like it was a stain on expensive fabric. My son Marcus stood beside her, eyes fixed on his shoes, silent as a stone. No defense, no protest, not even a glance my way. In that glittering ballroom surrounded by crystal chandeliers and designer gowns, I realized something that made my chest go tight. After 10 years of widowhood, 40 years of sacrifice, I was worth less than a photographer's assistant. I didn't cry. I lifted my chin, gripped my small clutch until my knuckles went white, and walked to that last row like I was crossing a bridge I'd never come back over. And when I sat down in that cold metal chair, a silver-haired man in an immaculate charcoal suit appeared beside me, placed his warm hand over my trembling one, and whispered 5 words that changed everything. Let's pretend we came together. I turned, my heart stopping mid-beat, and looked into eyes I thought I'd lost 50 years ago. They had no idea that the woman they'd just humiliated was about to become untouchable. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I'm 68 years old, widowed for 10 years, and I taught literature at Jefferson High School on the south side of Chicago for 43 years. I'm not wealthy by their standards, those country club people with their summer homes and their charity galas where the champagne costs more than my monthly grocery bill. But I own my house outright, a small brick 2-story that my late husband Thomas and I bought in 1979. I have my pension, my garden, and my dignity. Or at least I thought I had my dignity until today, until the moment my only son looked at me like I was a problem to be managed rather than the woman who'd raised him. The wedding was at Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate owned by the Montgomery family, Vivian's people. Old money, the kind that comes with portraits in the hallway and membership at clubs where they don't need to display price tags, because if you have to ask, you don't belong. The ceremony space alone could have fit my entire house 3 times over. Everything gleamed, polished marble floors, white roses flown in from Ecuador tables, draped in silk that probably cost more per yard than my best winter coat. String quartets playing Vivaldi, waiters in white gloves carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres with names I couldn't pronounce. I arrived exactly on time, wearing the navy dress I'd bought special for the occasion at Marshall's, the nicest thing in my closet. I'd even gotten my hair done at the salon, splurged on a proper style instead of my usual wash and set at home. I wanted to look good for Marcus, wanted him to be proud to introduce me to his new family. Naive, I know now, desperately naive. The coordinator met me at the entrance, a young woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes, the kind that assess your net worth in 3 seconds flat. She looked at my dress, at my sensible black pumps, at the small pearl earrings Thomas had given me for our 20th anniversary, and I saw something shift in her expression. Calculation. Dismissal. The decision that I didn't matter. Mrs. Hartley, she said, not Eleanor, not even mother of the groom, just the last name delivered like a file to be processed. We've made some adjustments to the seating chart. You'll be more comfortable in row 14. Row 14. I didn't understand at first. I looked at the printed seating chart she showed me, my finger tracing the rows. 1 through 5 were clearly marked with names I'd never heard. Vivian's family, her parents' business associates, society people. Rows 6 through 10 held Marcus's college friends, his colleagues from the investment firm. Row 11 had his aunt and uncle from his father's side, people I'd seen maybe twice in the last decade. Row 12 held the wedding party's parents. Row 13 was labeled Overflow, and row 14 sat directly behind the catering station next to the swinging door to the kitchen in the shadows, where the floral arrangements hadn't quite reached. There must be a mistake, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm the groom's mother. Yes, we're aware. The coordinator's smile was professional empty, but as you can see, the front sections are reserved for immediate family of significant social standing. This arrangement works better for everyone. Significant social standing. The words hit me like a slap I should have seen coming. Before I could respond, Vivian appeared a vision in her pre-ceremony outfit, some designer ensemble in cream silk that probably cost more than I'd spent on clothes in the last 5 years. She touched the coordinator's arm with that proprietary ease rich people have the casual assumption that everyone around them is staff. "Is there a problem?" Vivian asked, though her eyes were on me assessing, measuring, finding me wanting. "No problem at all," the coordinator said smoothly, "just confirming Mrs. Hartley's seating." Vivian's gaze traveled over me slowly, taking in every detail: my discount store dress, my aging pumps, the way I clutched my small handbag with both hands. I saw it all reflected in her eyes, the judgment, the disdain, the absolute certainty that I was beneath her notice. "Good," Vivian said, and then turning to me with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes, she added, "I hope you understand, Eleanor. My family has a reputation to maintain. We can't have anything that might seem out of place. Nothing personal, of course, just practical." Nothing personal, as if relegating your future mother-in-law to the service area was just logistics, just moving furniture around for better traffic flow. I wanted to say something, wanted to demand to speak to Marcus, to ask him how he could allow this to remind him of every sacrifice I'd made. But the words stuck in my throat, heavy and useless, because I already knew the answer. Marcus had allowed this because somewhere along the way, my son had learned to be ashamed of where he came from, ashamed of the small house with the chain-link fence, ashamed of the mother who'd worked double shifts at the library on weekends to pay for his college prep courses, ashamed of anything that didn't fit into the glossy, perfect world he'd married into. So I nodded. I nodded like a good, obedient woman who knew her place. And I walked to row 14, feeling every eye in that room tracking my movement, hearing whispers flutter behind manicured hands like moths against a screen. The chair was cold metal folding, rather than the cushioned ones up front. From here, I could see everything and nothing. The ceremony space stretched before me, beautiful and distant, like watching life through someone else's window. I could smell catering food being plated, hear the clatter of dishes, feel the rush of air every time the kitchen door swung open. This was where you put people who didn't matter, people you invited out of obligation but hoped would have the grace to disappear. Around me, the other seats in row 14 were mostly empty. A couple I didn't recognize sat 3 chairs down, looking equally uncomfortable. Behind me, the catering staff moved with practiced efficiency, and I realized with a sick sort of clarity that they probably had better seats to watch the ceremony than I did. My hands started shaking, not with sadness yet that would come later, with something else. Anger, maybe, or the terrible recognition that I'd spent 40 years raising a son who would do this to me. That all those nights I'd stayed up helping him with homework while working 2 jobs, all those times I'd scraped together money for his school trips while wearing the same winter coat for 5 years, all of it had led to this moment. To me, sitting in the shadows while my son married into a family that looked at me like I was something to be managed and minimized. The ceremony was starting. Music swelled, that traditional processional that sounds the same at every wedding, whether you're in a palace or a backyard. Guests rose. I rose too slowly, my knees protesting. From row 14, I could barely see over the sea of designer hats and carefully styled hair. I caught glimpses Marcus at the altar in his tuxedo, looking impossibly handsome and impossibly distant. The bridesmaids in their blush pink dresses like a parade of roses, the flower girl scattering petals with serious concentration. And then Vivian appearing at the end of the aisle on her father's arm. The dress was stunning, I'd give her that. A cascade of ivory silk and French lace that probably required its own insurance policy. Her veil floated behind her like a cloud. The guests gasped with appropriate awe. Camera flashes sparked like little stars. She didn't look at me. Not once. As she passed row 14, her gaze swept right over me, as if I were part of the furniture, something the venue provided along with the chairs and the flower arrangements. I felt something crack inside my chest, a small, quiet break, like ice forming over still water. The minister began speaking, his voice booming through the excellent sound system they'd installed. I heard the words as if from far away, love and commitment and joining of families, all those promises that should have meant something, but felt like a script everyone had memorized without understanding. And then he was there. The man who would save me, though I didn't know it yet. I was so focused on trying to see the ceremony, straining to catch a glimpse of my son's face, that I didn't notice when the seat beside me became occupied. One moment it was empty, the next there was warmth and the scent of expensive cologne, something with notes of bergamot and cedar. I glanced over, startled. The man was older, maybe 70, with silver hair swept back from a face that was all elegant lines and quiet strength. He wore a suit that even I could recognize as bespoke, the kind of tailoring that costs more than most people spend on a used car. His watch caught the light, Swiss and understated. Everything about him screamed wealth, but not the new flashy kind. This was old money, the real thing. Power that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. He shouldn't have been in row 14. Everything about him said front row head table, probably would have been seated with the Montgomery family if he'd wanted. Instead, he was here beside me, and he was reaching for my hand. I must have looked confused because he leaned in close enough that I could smell peppermint on his breath and whispered those words that would change everything. "Let's pretend we came together." I froze. His hand covered mine, warm and steady, and suddenly I wasn't shaking anymore. His touch was familiar in a way I couldn't quite place, like a song you heard once long ago and never quite forgot. "I don't understand," I whispered back, but he just smiled a small, knowing smile and gestured toward the ceremony with his free hand. "Just smile," he said. "Your son's about to look this way." I didn't know why I listened. Maybe because I'd spent the last hour feeling invisible and suddenly someone was seeing me. Maybe because his voice held something that sounded like kindness. Real kindness, not the fake politeness that came with social obligation. Or maybe because I was so tired of being ashamed of accepting humiliation, like it was something I deserved. So I smiled. I squeezed his hand back and turned my attention to the front, where Marcus was indeed glancing toward the back rows, his eyes scanning, probably looking for me, probably feeling some last flicker of guilt about where they'd seated me. And when his gaze landed on me, sitting beside this distinguished, obviously wealthy stranger, his face went absolutely white. Not pale, white, like he'd seen a ghost or realized he'd made a terrible miscalculation. The change rippled outward. I felt it more than saw it. Heads began to turn. The whispers that had been about poor Eleanor Hartley in her marshal's dress shifted. A woman in an elaborate fascinator leaned toward her companion, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "Who is that with the groom's mother? He looks familiar." Someone else murmured, "That's a Patek Philippe watch, and that suit is definitely Savile Row." The man beside me must have heard too, because I felt a quiet laugh rumble through him, subtle enough that only I would notice. Up front, Vivian had followed Marcus's stare. Her expression, which had been serene and bridal, flickered with something else. Confusion, then calculation, then something that looked almost like worry. The minister was still talking, but I could tell no one was really listening anymore. The attention had shifted, subtle but unmistakable. I was no longer the embarrassing poor relation tucked out of sight. I was now the mysterious woman, accompanied by someone who clearly belonged anywhere he chose to be. Power. I realized isn't always about money. Sometimes it's just about being seen with the right person. And whoever this man was, he was definitely the right person. The ceremony continued, but I felt lighter somehow, like someone had untied weights I'd been carrying for so long, I'd forgotten they were there. The stranger kept my hand in his, not possessive, just present, steady, like he was anchoring me to something solid while everything else shifted and rearranged itself around us. When the minister announced Marcus and Vivian as husband and wife, when they kissed to dutiful applause, when the recessional music swelled and the new couple walked back down the aisle, I stood with everyone else. And this time, when my son passed, he looked directly at me. Really looked. His face was tight with questions he couldn't ask, worry. He couldn't voice calculations spinning behind his eyes. Vivian's grip on his arm had gone rigid. She'd seen him look. She'd seen the stranger beside me. And she'd realized, as I was just beginning to realize, that something had shifted in the careful social equation she'd constructed. As the wedding party filed out as the guests began to drift toward the cocktail reception, the man beside me finally spoke again. His voice was quiet, meant only for me. "Shall we?" he asked, gesturing toward the exit. "I don't even know who you are," I said, and then stopped because that wasn't quite true. There was something about his eyes, something in the shape of his smile, a memory trying to surface like something seen through deep water. He stood, offered me his arm with old-fashioned courtesy, and when I took it, when I rose and let him guide me out of that horrible row 14, I felt every eye in the room track our movement. We walked slowly up the aisle, past all those expensive people in their expensive clothes, past the Montgomerys with their old money and their careful bloodlines, past Marcus's colleagues and Vivian's society friends. And I kept my head up, kept that small smile on my face, because I'd learned something in the last 10 minutes. Dignity isn't something people can take from you. It's something you give away. And I was done giving it away. At the door to the reception area, the man paused and turned to me. The light from the massive crystal chandelier caught his face, and suddenly, impossibly, I knew. Sebastian. I breathed the name rising from somewhere 50 years deep. He smiled that same smile I'd memorized when we were both young and foolish and thought love could conquer anything. "Hello, Eleanor. It's been a long time." My legs went weak. Sebastian Whitmore, my first love. The boy I'd met in college, the one who'd promised me everything and then disappeared to London for business school. The one who never wrote, never called, never came back. The one I'd convinced myself had forgotten me while I married safe, reliable Thomas and built a different life entirely. But you, I started my mind reeling. You were gone. You never came back. "I came back," he said quietly. "You were already married." The noise from the reception swirled around us, laughter and music and clinking glasses, but I couldn't hear any of it. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, loud and insistent, and the impossible truth standing in front of me. "Why are you here?" I managed. "Because 50 years ago someone kept us apart with lies and manipulation," Sebastian said, his voice steady, but edged with something fierce. "And today when I saw your name in the society pages as mother of the groom, when I saw the way they treated you, I decided history wasn't going to repeat itself." "The wedding announcement," I said stupidly. "You saw I was going to be here. I saw how they described you. Mother of the groom, retired teacher, Chicago South Side. They made it sound like an apology." His hand tightened on mine. "And I thought not this time. This time Eleanor Hartley walks in with someone who knows exactly what she's worth." I wanted to ask how he knew how they'd treated me, wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the coordinator was approaching, her eyes wide, her professional mask slipping into something closer to panic. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, and the title carried weight, fear recognition. "We weren't aware you'd be attending. If we'd known, we would have adjusted the seating arrangements." "No need," Sebastian said coolly. "I was exactly where I wanted to be." The coordinator's gaze darted between us, trying to recalculate, trying to figure out how she'd missed something this important. Behind her, I could see Vivian and Marcus frozen in the receiving line, watching us with expressions that mixed confusion and growing dread. "If you'll excuse us," Sebastian said, not waiting for a response, "I'd like to introduce Eleanor to some old friends." And then he was guiding me into the reception, past the coordinator, who couldn't quite close her mouth, past the guests, who were now staring openly toward a group of distinguished-looking people near the bar. Every step felt surreal, like I'd walked into someone else's story. "Eleanor," Sebastian said, as we approached a silver-haired woman in an elegant gray dress. "This is Catherine Montgomery. She's Vivian's great-aunt and an old friend of mine." Catherine turned, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Sebastian, darling, and this must be Marcus's mother. My dear, I've been dying to meet you. Sebastian has told me so much about your work at Jefferson High. That literacy program you started sounds absolutely marvelous." I blinked, trying to process. Sebastian had told her about my work. How did he even know about the literacy program? "I've kept track," Sebastian said softly, reading my confusion. Just because we lost each other doesn't mean I stopped caring what happened to you." Catherine was still talking, drawing me into conversation about education and community programs, and I found myself responding, answering questions, even laughing at something she said. Other people joined us, introduced by Sebastian with that same casual confidence. A district judge, a museum board president, the CEO of a major Chicago bank. All of them treating me like I belonged, like I was someone worth knowing, worth listening to. Across the room I caught sight of Marcus still in the receiving line, but his attention kept drifting our way. Vivienne had her hand locked on his arm, her smile growing more strained by the minute. Her mother, Patricia Montgomery, had appeared beside them, whispering urgently, her gaze fixed on Sebastian, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "They're recalculating," Sebastian murmured in my ear, "trying to figure out what they missed, trying to figure out how to fix what they've broken." "You're enjoying this," I said, and found I was almost smiling. "Immensely," he admitted. "But not as revenge, Eleanor. As justice. There's a difference." A waiter appeared with champagne. Sebastian took 2 glasses, handed me one. "To second chances," he said quietly, raising his glass. I looked at him. Really looked at him, trying to reconcile the boy I'd loved with the powerful man standing beside me. Time had changed him, carved lines around his eyes, silvered his hair, but the essential Sebastian was still there, in the way he looked at me, in the gentleness beneath the power. "To second chances," I echoed, and we drank. The reception flowed around us. Dinner was announced. Sebastian had somehow arranged for us to be seated at a table near the front next to the Montgomerys' table. Not row 14, not hidden away, present, visible, impossible to dismiss. During the meal, as servers brought course after elaborate course, I felt reality settling around me in pieces. This wasn't just about a wedding seating chart. This was about everything I'd accepted, everything I'd endured, every time I'd made myself smaller because someone else needed to feel bigger. "You're quiet," Sebastian observed as the main course was cleared. "I'm trying to understand what's happening." "What's happening," he said, setting down his fork, "is that you're remembering you were never as small as they tried to make you believe." I looked at him. "You can't just appear after 50 years and fix everything with expensive suits and important friends." "No," he agreed, "but I can stand beside you while you fix it yourself. And Eleanor," he leaned closer, his voice dropping, "I think you're about ready to do just that." Before I could respond, the sound of silverware against crystal rang out. Marcus was standing, microphone in hand, preparing to give the traditional groom's speech. My heart clenched. Part of me wanted to hear what he'd say. Part of me was terrified he'd say nothing about me at all, or worse, something carefully crafted to hide his shame. Marcus cleared his throat. His eyes found me across the room, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw my little boy again. The one who'd cried when he scraped his knee. The one who'd made me Mother's Day cards with too much glitter. The one who'd hugged me tight before his first day of school and told me I was the best mom in the whole world. Then Vivienne touched his hand, and the moment broke. "I want to thank everyone for being here." Marcus began, his voice smooth and practiced. "Vivienne and I are so grateful to be surrounded by family and friends on this special day." He went on thanking the Montgomerys for their generosity, thanking his groomsmen, thanking Vivienne's parents. The words flowed easily, perfectly rehearsed, and with each sentence my heart sank a little further. He wasn't going to mention me. In his own wedding speech, my son was going to pretend I didn't exist. Sebastian must have felt me tense because his hand found mine under the table, squeezed gently. Marcus was winding down, making some joke about married life that got polite laughter. I braced myself for the end, for the toast that would close his speech without ever acknowledging the woman who'd raised him alone after his father died. But then he paused. His gaze drifted to me again, longer this time. I saw something shift in his face, some internal struggle. Vivienne's smile had gone rigid. "And my mother," Marcus said finally, the words seeming to cost him something. "My mother taught me that real strength isn't about how much you have. It's about how much you give." The room had gone quiet. People were listening now, really listening. "She worked 2 jobs to put me through school. She gave up everything so I could have opportunities she never had. And today I realize I've failed to honor that sacrifice the way I should." His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, I'm sorry. For more than you know." I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Around the room I heard murmurs, saw heads turning toward me. Some expressions held sympathy. Others held shame, the recognition that they'd all participated in something wrong. Marcus raised his glass. "To my mother, Eleanor Hartley, the strongest woman I know." The toast echoed through the room. Everyone drank. And I sat there, Sebastian's hand warm around mine, and let the tears I'd been holding back finally fall. "That," Sebastian said softly, "is a start. Not enough, but a start." He was right. An apology in a wedding speech didn't undo the humiliation, didn't erase the pain of being dismissed and hidden. But it was something. A crack in the wall Marcus had built between us. After the speeches, as the band started playing and the dancing began, Patricia Montgomery approached our table. She wore power like perfume, expensive and obvious. Her smile was polished, perfect, and absolutely false. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, ignoring me entirely. "What a pleasant surprise to see you here. If we'd known you were acquainted with the Hartley family, we would have arranged proper seating." "The seating was perfect," Sebastian said, his tone pleasant, but with an edge that could cut. "It showed me exactly what I needed to know about your family's values." Patricia's smile flickered. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" Sebastian stood, offering me his hand. "Eleanor, would you like to get some air? I think the champagne is better appreciated, away from artificially fragrant company." I took his hand, trying not to laugh at the look on Patricia's face. As we walked away, I heard her calling after us, voice strained, trying to recover. Sebastian didn't pause. Outside, the evening had cooled. The manor's gardens stretched before us, lit by strings of tiny lights that made everything look like a fairy tale. We walked in silence for a while, following a path between rose bushes that probably cost more to maintain than my annual property tax. "Tell me," Sebastian said eventually. "Tell me everything. 50 years compressed into one honest conversation." So I did. Standing in that impossibly expensive garden, I told him about Thomas, about the good marriage that was never quite magic, about raising Marcus alone after Thomas died, about the pride I'd felt watching my son succeed, and the slow, painful realization that his success had come with a price that he'd learned to be ashamed of where he came from. I told him about the small humiliations that had built up over the years, the way Vivienne corrected my grammar, the way Marcus stopped inviting me to his work events, the way they'd announced their engagement at a restaurant I couldn't afford, and then looked surprised when I'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. And I told him about today, about that moment when the coordinator said row 14, and I realized my son had agreed to this, had stood by while his fiancée arranged to hide his mother away like a shameful secret. Sebastian listened without interrupting, his face grave. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I would have written you letters every week if I'd known," he said finally. "But someone made sure those letters never reached you." "Who?" "Your mother." His voice was gentle but firm. "I found out years later when I hired someone to look into what happened. She intercepted everything, told me you'd moved, told you I'd forgotten you. She wanted you to marry Thomas because he was safe, local, manageable. She was terrified I'd take you away to a life she couldn't control." The anger that rose in me was old, worn smooth by time, but still sharp enough to cut. My mother, who'd died 5 years ago, who I'd grieved properly and honestly, had stolen something from me I could never get back. The choice. The chance to know if Sebastian and I could have built something real. "I would have chosen you," I whispered. "I know," Sebastian said. And that's what she was afraid of. We stood there in the garden, two people who'd loved each other a lifetime ago, surrounded by wealth that neither of us had chosen. The party noise drifted over the hedges, laughter and music that felt very far away. "What happens now?" I asked. Sebastian turned to me, taking both my hands in his. "Now, Eleanor, we get to choose again. We're not kids anymore. We can't get back those 50 years. But we have whatever time we have left, and I vote we stop letting other people write our story." "I don't know how to do that," I admitted. I've spent so long being what other people needed me to be. Then learn, he said simply. Start tomorrow. Start tonight. Start by walking back into that reception and holding your head up, not because I'm beside you, but because you're Eleanor Hartley and you have nothing to apologize for. They'll talk. Let them. The people who matter won't gossip. The people who gossip don't matter. He smiled. It's a useful principle once you figure it out. We walked back slowly. At the entrance to the ballroom, Sebastian paused. One more thing. I own the building where Vivian's father has his company headquarters. The lease is up for renewal in 3 months. I stared at him. You what? Found out this morning, actually. Funny how these coincidences work. His expression was innocent. Too innocent. I imagine they'll want to discuss terms soon. Very soon. And I imagine those discussions will be much more pleasant if they've learned to treat certain people with appropriate respect. Sebastian, you can't use business to force them to be decent to me. I'm not forcing anything, he said mildly. I'm simply ensuring that actions have consequences. It's a market principle. Very capitalist, really. I looked at him. This man I'd loved and lost, and somehow found again. This man who'd walked into my worst moment and turned it into something else entirely. You're terrible, I said. I'm efficient, he corrected. There's a difference. And then we walked back into the reception together, and this time I wasn't afraid. Because I'd remembered something important, something I'd forgotten in all the years of making myself smaller, of apologizing for existing, of accepting less than I deserved. I'd remembered that Eleanor Hartley, retired teacher, South Side Chicago resident, mother of one ungrateful son and widow of one good man, was worth something. Not because of who she knew or what she owned or where she sat, but because she'd chosen to believe it. The night wore on. People approached us, wanting introductions to Sebastian, wanting to be associated with his obvious power. And because they wanted him, they had to acknowledge me. Had to smile, had to pretend they hadn't been part of something cruel. Marcus found me near midnight, as guests were starting to leave. Vivian was nowhere in sight. Mom, he said quietly, can we talk? I looked at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes who'd come from my body and somehow learned to value all the wrong things. Not tonight, I said. Tonight I'm tired and anything we say right now won't be honest because you're scared and I'm hurt. But maybe tomorrow, or the day after, when you're ready to have a real conversation about who we've become to each other. He nodded, looking relieved and devastated in equal measure. I really am sorry. I know you think you are, I said, but sorry is a word, Marcus. It only means something when behavior changes. I left him standing there and walked away with Sebastian out into the cool Chicago night, into the back of his town car, with its leather seats and its quiet driver who didn't ask questions. Home, Sebastian asked as the car pulled away from Ashford Manor. Home, I confirmed. He drove me to my small brick house with its chain-link fence and its modest garden. The contrast to where we'd been was almost funny. Sebastian walked me to the door, and in the porch light, I could see every line on his face, every year we'd lost. Coffee tomorrow, he asked. There's a lot more to talk about. Tomorrow, I agreed. And Sebastian, thank you. For showing up, for remembering, for making me remember. He kissed my forehead, gentle as rain. Sleep well, Eleanor. Dream about what you want your next chapter to look like, because starting tomorrow, we're writing it together. I watched him drive away, then let myself into the quiet house, my small, ordinary house that suddenly felt like exactly enough. I kicked off my shoes, made a cup of tea, and sat by the window looking out at the street where I'd lived for 44 years. On my phone there were already text messages, from Marcus apologizing again, from numbers I didn't recognize, probably wedding guests who'd gotten my contact from someone suddenly wanting to be friendly now that they'd seen me with Sebastian. I deleted them all, turned off my phone, drank my tea. Tomorrow there would be consequences to tonight, conversations to have, decisions to make. But tonight, I was just a woman who'd survived her own son's wedding and come out the other side with her dignity intact. Not because anyone gave it back to me, because I'd finally stopped giving it away. I went upstairs to the bedroom I'd shared with Thomas, to the bed I'd slept in alone for 10 years. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. Outside, a dog barked, a car passed, normal sounds from a normal life, and I smiled because I'd learned something essential today. Normal was enough. Ordinary was beautiful, and Eleanor Hartley, teacher, widow, mother, woman, was exactly who she needed to be. Nothing more, nothing less, just exactly enough. I fell asleep easily, deeply, peacefully, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of being small, of being quiet, of being acceptable. I dreamed of being free. The morning after the wedding, Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom curtains and the persistent buzz of her phone on the nightstand. She'd forgotten to silence it completely. Squinting at the screen, she saw 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize, but 3 were from Marcus, each one longer and more desperate than the last. She set the phone face down without reading them and went downstairs to make coffee. Her small kitchen felt different somehow, brighter maybe, or perhaps it was just that she was seeing it with new eyes. The chipped tile backsplash Thomas had installed himself, the vintage Formica countertop she'd always meant to replace but never had, the window over the sink that looked out onto her vegetable garden where tomatoes were just starting to ripen. Everything ordinary, everything hers. The coffee was still brewing when someone knocked on her front door. Sharp, insistent raps that suggested urgency. Eleanor tightened her bathrobe and peered through the peephole. Vivian stood on her porch, still in what looked like wedding weekend attire, designer jeans, and a silk blouse that probably cost more than Eleanor's monthly electric bill. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her makeup was minimal, which somehow made her look younger and more vulnerable. Behind her, a black Mercedes idled at the curb with a driver waiting inside. Eleanor took a breath and opened the door. "Eleanor," Vivian said, and there was something in her voice that wasn't there yesterday, something that sounded almost like fear. "I need to talk to you. Please, may I come in? It's 7 in the morning." "I know, I'm sorry, I've been awake all night." Vivian's hands twisted together. "Please, 5 minutes." Eleanor stepped back and let her in. Vivian's gaze swept the living room, taking in the worn furniture and the family photos on the walls, and Eleanor watched her daughter-in-law try very hard not to let judgment show on her face. "Coffee?" Eleanor asked, more out of habit than hospitality. "No, thank you." Vivian perched on the edge of the sofa like she was afraid to settle in. "I'll get right to it. Who is Sebastian Whitmore to you?" There it was. Eleanor poured herself a cup of coffee, taking her time letting the question hang in the air. An old friend. An old friend who owns half of Chicago's commercial real estate. An old friend who sits on the boards of 3 Fortune 500 companies. An old friend who apparently thinks enough of you to show up at my wedding and make a statement. Vivian's voice was rising, the careful control starting to crack. "My father spent all night on the phone trying to figure out your connection to him. Do you know what your old friend did? He called my father at 11 o'clock last night and asked to discuss lease renewal terms for the Montgomery building. At 11 o'clock, on my wedding night." Eleanor sipped her coffee. It was too hot, and she burned her tongue slightly, but she didn't let it show. "That sounds like a business matter between them." "Don't play naive. You know exactly what this is." Vivian stood up, pacing now. "He's using his leverage to punish my family because of the seating arrangement, because I put you in row 14. "You didn't put me anywhere, Vivian. You decided I wasn't worth a better seat. There's a difference." "It was a logistical decision. We had limited space up front, and my family has business associates who needed to be prioritized. It wasn't personal." "Everything about it was personal." Eleanor set down her coffee cup with deliberate care. "You told the coordinator that your family would lose face if my poverty showed. You said that to her about me, your husband's mother, the woman who raised the man you married." Vivian went pale. "You heard that?" "I heard everything. The acoustics in Ashford Manor are excellent." Eleanor stood now too, facing her daughter-in-law across the small room. "You want to know who Sebastian is? He's someone who remembered that I have value. He's someone who saw me being treated like garbage at my own son's wedding and decided to remind everyone, including me, that dignity isn't defined by bank accounts." I wasn't trying to hurt you. No, you were trying to hide me, which is worse. Eleanor's voice stayed level, but she could feel old anger rising, anger she'd suppressed for too long. You've been trying to hide me since the day Marcus introduced us. The dinner where you corrected my grammar in front of your friends. The Christmas where you gave me a gift certificate to a department store with a note suggesting I update my wardrobe. The engagement party where you seated me at a table with the caterers because you said I'd be more comfortable there. I was trying to help you fit in. No, you were trying to make me invisible because you're ashamed that Marcus came from nothing, that his mother is a public school teacher who shops at discount stores and doesn't know which fork to use at your fancy dinners. Eleanor took a step closer. But here's what you didn't know, Vivian. I'm not ashamed. I worked 2 jobs to put my son through school. I sacrificed everything so he could have opportunities. And if that embarrasses you, that's your failing, not mine. Vivian's eyes were wet now. I didn't know it mattered so much to you. You didn't ask. You decided. You decided I didn't matter enough to treat with basic respect. You decided my feelings were less important than your father's business associates. You decided all of that without once considering that maybe, just maybe, the woman who raised your husband deserved better. They stood in silence. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled past. Eleanor's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was already out watering her roses. Normal morning sounds from a normal neighborhood so different from the rarefied world Vivian inhabited. "What do you want?" Vivian asked finally. "What do I need to do to fix this?" "I want you to understand something. Sebastian Whitmore showing up yesterday, that was a gift I didn't ask for and don't need to keep. I don't need his money or his influence to have value. I had value all along. The problem is that you and my son forgot that, and I let you forget it because I was afraid of losing Marcus." Eleanor picked up her coffee again. "But I'm not afraid anymore. So what I want is for you to go home and think about whether you can actually respect me or if you're just scared of what Sebastian might do to your father's business. That's not fair." "Fair?" Eleanor almost laughed. "You want to talk about fair? You put me behind the catering station at my own son's wedding, and now you're in my house at 7 in the morning worried about fair." Vivian opened her mouth closed. It tried again. "I'll talk to Marcus. We'll make this right. Talk to yourself first. Figure out what kind of person you want to be. Because right now, Vivian, you're the kind who measures people by their tax brackets and their zip codes, and that's a very small way to live." Vivian moved toward the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not because of Sebastian. Because I hurt you. I see that now." "Good," Eleanor said. "That's a start. But sorry is easy to say when there are consequences. Come back when you're sorry enough to change." After Vivian left, Eleanor sat in her quiet living room and let herself shake. Confrontation had never been easy for her. Thomas used to joke that she'd apologize to a door if she walked into it. But something had shifted yesterday, sitting in row 14 beside Sebastian, feeling the power of simply refusing to be ashamed. She'd found a backbone she'd forgotten she had. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sebastian. "Good morning?" His voice was warm, amused. "I hope I'm not calling too early." "Your timing is perfect. I just had a visit from my daughter-in-law." "Ah, let me guess, concerned about lease negotiations." Among other things. Eleanor walked to the window watching Vivian's car pull away. "Did you really call her father at 11 last night?" "I did. I find that business discussions are most productive when people are already off balance. He was very receptive to my suggestions." "Sebastian, you can't leverage your business dealings to force my family to treat me better. Can't I?" He sounded genuinely curious. "Why not? Because it's manipulative and wrong, and I don't want people being nice to me out of fear." "Eleanor, people like the Montgomerys only understand power. They respect money and influence because those are the only currencies they value. If I have to remind them that disrespecting you comes with a price tag, I'm happy to do it. But then I'm just trading one kind of dependence for another. I spent my whole marriage being Thomas's wife, then I was Marcus's mother, and now what I'm Sebastian Whitmore's charity case." The line went quiet. When Sebastian spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "Is that really what you think?" That helping someone you care about is charity? I don't know what to think. Everything's happening so fast. Yesterday I was invisible, and today I'm suddenly important because you showed up. It doesn't feel real. Then let's make it real. Have lunch with me, not at some expensive restaurant where we'll be seen and photographed. At Romano's, the little Italian place on 12th Street, if it's still there. Eleanor felt her breath catch. Romano's that's been closed for 20 years. Then somewhere like it, somewhere normal, where we can talk without audiences or agendas, just two old friends figuring out what 50 lost years means. She wanted to say no, wanted to maintain distance and perspective and all the safe barriers she'd built around herself. But she heard herself saying, 1 o'clock. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 12:45. After they hung up, Eleanor stood in her kitchen and realized she was smiling. Not the polite smile she'd worn at the wedding, a real smile, the kind that came from somewhere genuine. Her phone buzzed again, Marcus this time calling, not texting. She answered. Hello, Marcus. Mom. His voice was hoarse, strained. Mom, I'm so sorry. Vivian just left your house and she told me everything you said, and I need you to know that I didn't realize how badly we'd hurt you. You didn't realize, or you didn't want to know. Silence. Then, I think maybe both. I got so caught up in Vivian's world and trying to fit into her family that I forgot where I came from. I forgot who raised me. You didn't forget Marcus. You chose to distance yourself. There's a difference. Eleanor sat down at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd helped him with homework, where they'd eaten dinner together for years after Thomas died. You stopped inviting me to your work events. You started acting embarrassed when I'd say something that wasn't sophisticated enough. You let Vivian treat me like I was some kind of burden you had to manage. I know. God, Mom, I know. And yesterday when I saw you sitting there in that back row, saw your face when they made you walk past everyone, I wanted to die. But I didn't say anything because I was too much of a coward. Yes, you were. Another silence, this one heavier. Eleanor could hear him breathing, could picture him in his expensive apartment with its lake views and its furniture that cost more than she'd spent on her entire house. Who is Sebastian Whitmore? Marcus asked finally. Vivian's father is losing his mind. He says Whitmore could destroy our family's business if he wanted to. He's someone I knew a long time ago, before your father. Someone you knew. Mom, the man owns half of downtown Chicago. He sits on the Federal Reserve Advisory Board. He's been photographed with 3 presidents, and he shows up at my wedding to sit with you in the back row. That's not just someone you knew. We were in love, Eleanor said quietly. 50 years ago, before I met your father, we were going to get married, and then he went to London, and I thought he'd forgotten me, so I moved on. I married Thomas. I built a different life. But he didn't forget. No, he came back. I was already married. He left again. And then yesterday, when he saw how your wife's family was treating me, he decided to remind everyone that I matter. Eleanor traced the grain of the wooden table with one finger. But you know what, Marcus? I shouldn't need Sebastian Whitmore to matter. I should matter because I'm your mother, because I raised you alone after your father died, because I gave up everything for you. That should be enough. It is enough, Mom. It is. I got lost somewhere, started measuring things by the wrong metrics. Then find your way back, because right now, son, I don't recognize you. The boy I raised would never have let anyone treat his mother the way Vivian treated me. The boy I raised had character. She could hear him crying now, trying to muffle it. Tell me how to fix this. Please, tell me what I need to do. I can't tell you, Marcus. You have to figure it out yourself. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be. The kind who stands up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, or the kind who goes along with cruelty because speaking up might cost him something. I want to be better. I will be better. Then prove it. Not with words, with action, with choices. Show me the man you're capable of being instead of the one you've become. They talked for another 20 minutes, circling around hurt and apology and complicated feelings that didn't have easy resolutions. When Eleanor finally hung up, she felt exhausted and strangely hopeful at the same time. The conversation hadn't fixed anything, but it had cracked something open. let light into dark places. She spent the rest of the morning in her garden, pulling weeds and checking on her tomatoes, letting the familiar work calm her mind. Mrs. Chen called over the fence, wanting to know all about the wedding, and Eleanor found herself giving an edited version that left out row 14 and focused on the dress and the flowers and the food. "Your son married very well," Mrs. Chen said approvingly. "That Montgomery family very prestigious." "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "Very prestigious." At 12:30, she went inside and changed into a simple cotton dress. Nothing fancy, and pulled her hair back. When Sebastian's car arrived, she was ready, but her stomach was doing complicated things that reminded her of being 18 and nervous before her first real date. Sebastian got out and came to the door himself, no driver waiting in the car this time. He wore khakis and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he looked more like the boy she'd known than he had yesterday in his expensive suit. "You look beautiful," he said. "I look old and tired and ordinary." "You look like Eleanor." "That's all I've wanted to see for 50 years. They drove to a small diner on the south side, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that came in thick ceramic mugs. Nothing fancy, nothing performative, just good food and honest atmosphere. Over burgers and fries they talked, really talked, not the careful surface conversation from yesterday, but the deep, messy kind that required courage. "Tell me about Thomas," Sebastian said. "I want to know who you married, what your life was like." So Eleanor told him about Thomas, who was solid and kind and never exciting, but always there. About the good marriage that was never quite magic, but was comfortable and safe. About raising Marcus alone after Thomas died of a heart attack at 52, about the grief and the loneliness and the slow process of building a life as a widow. "Did you love him?" Sebastian asked. "Yes, not the way I loved you, but yes, I loved him. He was good to me. He was good to Marcus. He worked hard and provided for us and never once made me feel small." Eleanor met Sebastian's eyes. He deserved better than a wife who sometimes late at night wondered about the boy who got away. "And I've spent 50 years alone because no one was you. We're both idiots, I think. Absolute idiots." They laughed, and it felt good, felt real. Around them, the diner hummed with normal life waitresses calling orders, dishes clattering, people having ordinary Monday lunch conversations. "I hired a private investigator in 1978, Sebastian said. "I needed to know what happened, why you never answered my letters. He found out about your mother, found the unopened letters in her storage unit after she died, all returned to sender marked refused. She intercepted everything. Told me you'd moved with no forwarding address. Told you I'd abandoned you." Eleanor felt old anger stir again. Anger at a woman 5 years dead who couldn't defend herself and didn't deserve defending. She was terrified I'd leave Chicago, leave her. She wanted me to marry local, marry safe, marry someone she could control. "So she stole your choice, our choice." "Yes." Eleanor pushed fries around her plate. "And I let her. I let her convince me that you'd moved on, that I was being foolish for waiting. I let her fear become my fear, and then Thomas asked me to marry him, and I said yes, because it felt like the responsible thing to do." "Responsible?" Sebastian's smile was sad. "We built entire lives around being responsible. And look where it got us." "Thomas was good to me," Eleanor insisted. "I don't want you to think I was miserable. I had a good life. I raised a good son, or at least I thought I did until this weekend. I had work I loved, friends, a community. It wasn't the life I imagined when I was 18 and in love with you, but it was a good life." "I know, and I'm not trying to diminish that. I'm just saying we both lost something because someone else decided they knew better than we did what we should want." They finished eating and ordered coffee. The lunch rush was starting, the diner filling with workers on break, mothers with small children, elderly couples who'd probably been coming here for decades. Eleanor watched them all and thought about the quiet dignity of ordinary lives. "What happens now?" she asked. "Between us, I mean. Are we starting over? Picking up where we left off? Pretending 50 years didn't happen?" "I don't know," Sebastian admitted. I know I want to spend time with you, know you again, figure out who we've become. But we're not kids anymore, Eleanor. We have histories and baggage and complicated children and health issues and all the reality that comes with being nearly 70. So we're too old for grand romance. I didn't say that. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm saying we're old enough to do this right. No rushing, no pretending. Just honest companionship and seeing where it goes. I'd like that. Eleanor squeezed his hand back. But Sebastian, about the Montgomery building and the lease negotiations, you need to let that go. I don't want my relationship with my son defined by business leverage. What if I told you it's already done? That I called Richard Montgomery this morning and offered him a very generous lease renewal with minimal increases, contingent only on his daughter learning basic human decency. Eleanor tried to look stern but felt herself smiling instead. You're incorrigible. I'm effective. There's a difference. They left the diner as afternoon was settling in the summer heat, making the sidewalk shimmer. Sebastian drove her home and walked her to the door again, and for a moment they stood there like teenagers at the end of a date, uncertain and hopeful at once. Thank you for lunch, Eleanor said. Thank you for giving me a second chance I probably don't deserve. We both deserve second chances. That's what being human means. We get to keep trying. He kissed her cheek, gentle and sweet, and something in Eleanor's chest loosened some tight knot she'd been carrying for 5 decades. Inside, she found Marcus sitting on her front steps, still in his honeymoon clothes, looking wrung out and young, despite his 35 years. I've been waiting for 2 hours, he said. I texted, but you didn't answer. I was at lunch. What are you doing here, Marcus? Shouldn't you be on your honeymoon? We postponed it. There are more important things right now. He stood, hands shoved in his pockets. Mom, I need to tell you something. About Vivian's family. About our life. They went inside, and Marcus sat at the kitchen table in the chair that had been his since he was small enough to need a booster seat. Eleanor made tea because she didn't know what else to do with her hands. The Montgomerys are not what they seem, Marcus began. All that old money prestige, it's mostly smoke and mirrors. Vivian's father has been leveraging debt to maintain appearances. The company's overextended. They need that building lease renewal desperately, because if they have to relocate, if there's any public indication of financial instability, the whole house of cards could collapse. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what yesterday was really about. Vivian wasn't just being cruel or snobbish. She was terrified. Her whole family was terrified that anything that looked wrong or poor or struggling would tip off investors and creditors. They've been living on borrowed time and borrowed money, and you, Mom, you represented everything they're trying to hide from. Real struggle, real work, real lack of wealth. Eleanor sat down slowly. So I was inconvenient. You were threatening. Not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. The idea that you can be happy and fulfilled and decent without money, without status, without any of the things they've sold their souls to maintain. Marcus looked down at his hands, and I went along with it because I was so dazzled by their world that I forgot mine, forgot ours. What about Vivian? Does she know all this? She knows her father's struggling. She doesn't know how bad it is. She thinks they're still secure, still powerful. Finding out that Sebastian Whitmore, who could buy and sell their entire company without blinking, found out that he's on your side, that terrified her because suddenly the power dynamic flipped. Eleanor drank her tea, processing. I don't want to be vindictive, Marcus. I don't want to destroy anyone's business or ruin anyone's life. I know, Mom. That's why you're better than all of us. Marcus's voice cracked. But you deserve to know the truth. And I deserve to face what I've done. I married into a family that values appearance over substance, and I let them convince me that you weren't good enough for their world, when the truth is, they're not good enough for yours. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, Eleanor could hear children playing in a neighbor's yard, their shouts and laughter carrying on the summer air. Normal sounds, ordinary life continuing regardless of complex adult problems. What are you going to do? Eleanor asked finally. About what? About your marriage. About Vivian. About the life you've built with her family. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. I don't know. I love her, Mom. I really do. But I don't love who I become around her family. And I don't know if that's something we can fix or if it's too fundamental. Only you can answer that. But Marcus, listen to me. Don't stay in a marriage because you're embarrassed to admit it was a mistake. Don't stay because of money or status or what people will think. Stay because you genuinely love her and believe you can build something honest together. Otherwise, you'll end up like me, looking back at 50 years and wondering what might have been different. You regret marrying Dad. No, I regret not having the choice. I regret letting someone else's fear dictate my life. Eleanor reached across and took his hand. Choose your own life, Marcus, whatever that looks like, but choose it honestly. He left as evening was settling in, promising to call tomorrow, promising to figure things out, promising everything except the one thing that mattered, which was concrete change. Eleanor watched him drive away and wondered if people ever really changed or if they just became more of what they already were. Her phone rang. Patricia Montgomery, this time the matriarch herself. Eleanor. Patricia's voice was crisp, controlled. I think we should meet tomorrow morning, my club. I don't belong to your club, Patricia. I'll add you as my guest. We need to discuss the situation. What situation would that be? A pause. Then more carefully, the situation with Mr. Whitmore, and certain business matters that affect both our families. If you want to talk, we can talk here, at my house, tomorrow at 10. I don't think that's appropriate. Then we won't talk. Eleanor kept her voice pleasant. Because I'm done going to places where people make me feel small. If you want a conversation, Patricia, you come to my world. Otherwise, whatever you have to say can wait until you learn some manners. She hung up before Patricia could respond, her heart hammering. She'd just hung up on one of Chicago's most prominent society women, the kind of woman who could make or break reputations with a word at the right dinner party. And Eleanor found she didn't care at all. Patricia Montgomery arrived at Eleanor's house at precisely 10 the next morning, stepping out of a Mercedes that probably cost more than Eleanor had earned in 5 years of teaching. She wore a cream Chanel suit and Pearl's armor dressed as elegance, and her expression suggested she was entering a particularly unsavory part of town, rather than a modest but well-maintained neighborhood. Eleanor watched from the window as Patricia surveyed the street, taking in the chain-link fences and the modest cars and the children's toys scattered across lawns. She saw Patricia's nose wrinkle slightly before the mask of politeness slid back into place. When Eleanor opened the door, Patricia's smile was tight. "Thank you for seeing me. Come in." Eleanor stepped aside, noting how Patricia hesitated on the threshold as if crossing into foreign territory. "Coffee, I'm afraid it's just Folgers, nothing fancy." "No, thank you." Patricia perched on the edge of Eleanor's worn sofa, her posture so rigid it looked painful. Her gaze darted around the room, cataloging the discount store furniture and the family photos in drugstore frames, and Eleanor could practically see her calculating net worth, finding it wanting. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries," Patricia said. "You know why I'm here. Sebastian Whitmore. My husband tells me you have some kind of relationship with him." "We knew each other a long time ago." "How long ago and how well?" Patricia's tone was sharp, now the polite veneer cracking. "Because, Eleanor, I need you to understand something. That man has the power to destroy my family's business. One word from him, and we lose everything we've built over 3 generations. Then perhaps you shouldn't have treated his friend so poorly." Patricia's jaw tightened. "The seating at the wedding was Vivian's decision. I had nothing to do with it." "You raised her, didn't you? Taught her what matters, what has value, how to treat people." Eleanor sat down in her armchair, the one Thomas used to occupy. "Vivian learned those attitudes somewhere, Patricia. She didn't wake up one day deciding that people without money weren't worth basic respect. We live in a world with hierarchies, whether you like it or not. Social structures exist for a reason." "And where exactly do I fall in your social structure? Below the photographers? Below the catering staff?" Eleanor kept her voice level, but let steel creep in. "I'm the mother of your son-in-law, the grandmother of any children Marcus and Vivian might have, and you had me seated in row 14 like I was a distant cousin, no one wanted to acknowledge. Patricia looked away, something flickering across her face that might have been shame if Eleanor was being generous. "I apologize if you felt slighted. That wasn't the intention." "Stop lying." Eleanor leaned forward. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted me out of sight because a public school teacher from the South Side didn't fit the image you were trying to project. You were embarrassed by me, by my clothes, by my lack of pedigree, and you taught your daughter to be embarrassed too." "Fine." Patricia's mask cracked completely now, revealing something ugly underneath. "Yes, I thought you were inappropriate for the front rows. Yes, I thought your presence there would reflect poorly on our family. Is that what you want to hear? That I judged you and found you lacking? I want to hear the truth, finally. The truth is that maintaining social position requires constant vigilance. Every detail matters, every perception counts. And having Marcus's mother, who lives in this—" Patricia waved her hand dismissively at Eleanor's living room, "who dresses like she shops at garage sales, who has no understanding of our world. Yes, that was a problem we needed to manage." Eleanor felt something cold settle in her chest. "Needed to manage. That's what I am to you, a problem to be managed. You have to understand it's nothing personal. It's just reality. Our circles, our business partners, our social standing, it all depends on maintaining certain standards. And you don't meet those standards. You never could." "Then let me be very clear about something, Patricia." Eleanor stood now, and she was surprised by how calm she felt, how centered. "I don't want to meet your standards. I don't want to be part of your circles. I spent 43 years teaching children how to read and think and question the world around them. I raised a son alone on a teacher's salary and put him through college. I've lived a good, honest, meaningful life without ever once caring whether I impressed people like you. And you know what? I'm proud of that. Prouder than you'll ever be of your designer clothes and your country club memberships and your desperate attempts to hide the fact that your family is drowning in debt." Patricia went white. "How did you—" "Marcus told me about the leveraged buyouts and the cash flow problems and the house of cards your husband has been building. Told me how terrified you all are that Sebastian Whitmore might decide not to renew your lease, might let slip to the right people that Montgomery Industries isn't quite as stable as it pretends to be." "That's confidential information. He had no right. He's my son. And he finally remembered where his loyalties should lie." Eleanor moved to the door, opening it. "So here's what's going to happen, Patricia. You're going to leave my house. You're going to tell your daughter that if she wants any kind of relationship with me, she needs to learn how to treat people with basic human dignity. And you're going to stop measuring people's worth by their bank accounts and their zip codes. And if I don't—" Patricia stood, drawing herself up to her full height. "What exactly do you think you can do to me?" "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." Eleanor smiled. "But Sebastian might have different ideas. And unlike you, Patricia, I'm not going to use business leverage to force good behavior. I'm just going to step back and let natural consequences happen. You treated me like garbage, and it turns out garbage sometimes has powerful friends. Life's funny that way." Patricia's face had gone from white to red. "You're threatening me." "I'm educating you. There's a difference." Eleanor gestured to the open door. "Now please leave. I have gardening to do and you're blocking my light." Patricia stalked out, heels clicking sharply on the walkway. At her car, she turned back. "You'll regret this. People like you don't win against people like us." "People like me already won, Patricia. We won by not becoming people like you." Eleanor closed the door and leaned against it, her heart racing, but her spirit soaring. Through the window, she watched Patricia's Mercedes peel away with more speed than dignity, and she laughed, actually laughed out loud at the absurdity of it all. Her phone rang. Sebastian, his timing impeccable as always. "I just got a very interesting call from Richard Montgomery," he said, sounding amused. "Something about his wife being insulted in your home. He seemed quite agitated." "I may have told his wife some uncomfortable truths about her character and her family's financial situation." "Eleanor Hartley, did you just go to war with Chicago society?" "I think I did. Is that a problem?" "It's magnificent." And Sebastian was definitely laughing now. "I've been trying to take these people down a notch for 30 years and you managed it in one conversation. What did you say to her?" Eleanor recounted the conversation, not leaving out Patricia's contempt or her own responses, and with each detail, Sebastian's laughter grew warmer. "So, what happens now?" Eleanor asked when she'd finished. "Do they come after me? Start spreading rumors? Try to hurt Marcus's career?" "They might try, but Eleanor, here's what they don't understand. They have no power over you. You don't need their approval or their acceptance. You don't move in their circles or depend on their goodwill. You're untouchable because you never wanted what they have in the first place." That's very philosophical, but Marcus has to work with these people, live in their world. I might have just made his life much harder. Or you might have just shown him what real strength looks like. Sometimes our children need to see us fight back, Eleanor, even when it costs us something. They talked for a few more minutes, making plans to have dinner that weekend, something simple and unhurried. After hanging up, Eleanor did go work in her garden, pulling weeds and staking tomatoes, while Mrs. Chen called over the fence, wanting to know who the fancy lady in the Mercedes was. "Just someone who needed to learn a lesson," Eleanor called back, and left it at that. That afternoon, Vivian appeared at her door again, this time without the polished armor of yesterday. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked young and lost and nothing like the confident bride from 2 days ago. "My mother called," Vivian said without preamble. "She told me what you said to her. She's furious. My father's furious. They want Marcus to divorce me and cut all ties with you before you destroy our family." "And what do you want?" Vivian's face crumpled. "I don't know anymore. I thought I knew exactly who I was and what mattered, and now everything's falling apart, and I don't understand how it happened so fast." Eleanor stepped back, letting her in. This time, when Vivian sat on the sofa, she collapsed into it, rather than perching on the edge. She looked smaller, somehow diminished. "My whole life," Vivian said quietly, "I was taught that certain things mattered. The right schools, the right friends, the right address, the right clothes. My mother has a literal checklist of requirements for people worth knowing, and I internalized all of it without ever questioning whether it was right or true or good. I know, I could tell. When I met Marcus, he seemed perfect, ambitious, smart, handsome, but also hungry, hungry to be more than he was, to escape where he came from. And I thought, good, he understands. He knows what it takes to rise up. He won't drag me down. But I was the part that didn't fit. You were everything my mother taught me to look down on. No money, no connections, no sophistication. And Marcus was so eager to distance himself from his background that it was easy to just push you aside." Vivian wiped her eyes. "I told myself we were helping him become the man he was meant to be. I didn't see that we were destroying the man he was." Eleanor sat down across from her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my mother is wrong. My father is wrong. They're so focused on maintaining appearances that they can't see everything crumbling around them. The debt, the lies, the fake smiles over real problems. And I've been exactly like them, choosing image over substance, status over character." Vivian looked up, meeting Eleanor's eyes. "I don't want to be like them anymore. I don't want to be the person who put you in row 14, but I don't know how to be anyone else." "You start by telling the truth. To yourself first, then to other people." "The truth is, I'm terrified. Terrified that if I change, if I stand up to my parents and their world, I'll lose everything. Marcus might leave me, my family might disown me, and I'll be alone with nothing. Or," Eleanor said gently, "you might find out who you really are underneath all that fear and programming. You might discover you're stronger than you think." "How did you do it? How did you sit in that back row and not fall apart?" "I did fall apart. I just did it quietly where no one could see. And then Sebastian showed up and reminded me that I'm worth more than where someone seats me at a party." Eleanor leaned forward. "But Vivian, I didn't need Sebastian to have value. I had value all along. The problem was I'd forgotten it, had let people like your mother convince me that worth was something other people bestowed rather than something inherent." "Teach me," Vivian said suddenly. "Teach me how to be like you, How to not care what people think. I care what people think. I just stopped letting it control me. There's a difference. Eleanor stood, moved to the window. You want to know the secret? It's not complicated. You just decide that your own approval matters more than anyone else's. You decide that living honestly is more important than living impressively. And then you make choices that align with that decision over and over, even when it's hard. My mother will never forgive me if I side with you against her. Then you'll know where you stand. And Vivian, if your mother's love is conditional on you treating people badly, on maintaining her prejudices and her fears, then maybe that's not love worth keeping. They sat in silence for a while, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Eleanor could hear children playing outside the ordinary soundtrack of a Tuesday afternoon in a modest neighborhood. Nothing special, nothing impressive, just life happening in its messy, complicated, beautiful way. Marcus wants to go to couples therapy, Vivian said finally. He says we need to figure out who we are separate from our families before we can figure out who we are together. I think he might be right. I think he might be too. Will you forgive me eventually? For the wedding, for everything. Eleanor looked at this young woman, wealthy and privileged and completely lost, and felt something soften in her chest. I think forgiveness is something we earn through change, not words. So ask me again in 6 months. Ask me after you've done the work of becoming someone who wouldn't put their mother-in-law in row 14. Vivian nodded, wiping her eyes again. That's fair. That's more than fair. After Vivian left, Eleanor felt drained in the way deep conversations leave you empty. She made tea and sat in her kitchen, Thomas's kitchen, and thought about all the ways life twists and turns, how people become and unbecome themselves, how courage is sometimes just the willingness to tell the truth when lying would be easier. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Vivian told me about your conversation. Thank you for not giving up on her, or me. Love you, Mom. Eleanor smiled and typed back, Love you too. Now do better. That evening, Sebastian called again. Dinner reservation for Friday at 7. That Italian place you mentioned, the one that replaced Romano's. Unless you'd rather somewhere else. That sounds perfect. Good. And Eleanor, I have some news about the Montgomery situation. Richard called this afternoon. He's offering to make a very public donation to Jefferson High School's literacy program in your name, $500,000. I think he's hoping it will smooth things over. Eleanor's breath caught. $500,000, Sebastian, it's guilt money, Eleanor, but it's also money that could help a lot of kids learn to read. So the question is, do you take it and use it for good, or do you reject it on principle? She thought about her former students, about the kids still struggling in classrooms with outdated books and not enough resources. Thought about how many lives could change with that kind of funding. I'll take it, she said slowly. Not because I forgive them, but because those kids deserve every chance they can get, regardless of where the money comes from. Wise choice. I'll have my attorneys drop the paperwork, make sure the donation is public and binding, and comes with appropriate recognition of your work. Sebastian, you don't have to manage all this for me. I'm not managing it for you. I'm supporting you while you manage it yourself. There's a difference. After they hung up, Eleanor sat with her tea growing cold, and thought about the strange paths life takes, how sometimes the worst moments crack open into the best ones, how being pushed to row 14 had somehow led to finding Sebastian again and finding herself in the process. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls and unexpected visitors. The principal from Jefferson High called incredulous about the donation. Former colleagues reached out, some congratulating her, others curious about her sudden prominence in the news. A reporter from the Tribune wanted an interview about innovative funding for public education. Through it all, Eleanor maintained her routine. She watered her garden and had coffee with Mrs. Chen and went to the grocery store where she still clipped coupons, because old habits die hard. She was the same Eleanor Hartley she'd always been, just somehow more visible, more herself. On Thursday evening, Marcus showed up with takeout Chinese food and a tentative smile. Peace offering, I brought extra egg rolls. They ate at her kitchen table, not talking about anything important at first, just the weather and baseball and neighborhood gossip. But after they'd cleared the plates, Marcus set down his beer and looked at her seriously. "I told Vivian's parents, I'm done being ashamed of you, done pretending you're not as important as they are, done measuring my life by their standards." His voice was steady, but Eleanor could hear the cost. "They're not happy. Vivian's mother said I'm being manipulated by you and Sebastian. Her father implied my career at the firm might suffer." "Oh, Marcus. No, it's okay. Actually, it's better than okay. It's clarifying. You know, Vivian and I had this long talk last night about what we really want, who we really want to be. And we agreed that if staying in her family's good graces means compromising our integrity, then maybe we don't want to stay. That's a brave choice. A hard choice. You made hard choices for me my whole life, Mom. Worked 2 jobs so I could have opportunities. Sacrificed everything for my future. The least I can do is sacrifice some social standing for the truth." He reached across and took her hand. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember what you taught me, about character and integrity and treating people right regardless of their bank accounts." Eleanor squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick her eyes. "You remembered when it counted. That's what matters. Sebastian's a good man. I've been doing research reading about his foundation work, his support for education initiatives. He's not just rich, Mom. He uses his wealth to do actual good in the world. He always wanted to make a difference. Even when we were kids, he talked about changing things, making them better." "Are you going to marry him?" Marcus asked suddenly. Eleanor laughed, startled. "We've only been back in each other's lives for a week. That's hardly enough time to—" "Mom, you were in love with him 50 years ago, and he's been in love with you all this time. Life's too short to pretend you need to take things slow. We're nearly 70 years old. Marriage at our age seems like exactly what you should do if you want to. Stop worrying about what's appropriate or expected. Just be happy." Marcus stood, came around the table, hugged her tight. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. You've earned it about 1,000 times over." After he left, Eleanor sat with those words. You deserve to be happy. Such a simple concept, but one she'd spent decades not quite believing. She'd been Thomas's wife, Marcus's mother, her student's teacher, always defined by her relationship to other people. When had she last thought about Eleanor separate from all those roles? She pulled out her old photo albums, the ones from college, finding pictures of herself at 18 with Sebastian. They looked so young, so hopeful, so certain that love could conquer anything. And here they were, 50 years later, no longer young, but maybe still hopeful, learning that sometimes love gets a second chance if you're brave enough to take it. Friday arrived clear and warm, perfect summer evening weather. Eleanor spent longer than usual getting ready, trying on 3 different dresses, before settling on a simple navy blue one that made her feel elegant without trying too hard. She did her makeup carefully, put on the pearl earrings Thomas had given her, and stared at herself in the mirror. 70 years old, face lined with all those years, hair more silver than brown, body that had carried a child and weathered 7 decades of living. Not young, not conventionally beautiful, but somehow looking at herself through Sebastian's eyes, through her own new understanding, not bad either. Just real, just human, just enough. Sebastian arrived exactly on time, wearing a sport coat and open collar shirt that managed to look both casual and expensive. He held out a single white rose. "For the most interesting woman in Chicago." "Flattery will get you everywhere." "That's what I'm counting on." The restaurant was small and family-owned, red and white checkered tablecloths and candles and Chianti bottles, the kind of place that valued good food over impressive ambiance. Perfect. Over pasta and wine, they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his company, about the projects he was funding, about his plans to slow down and actually enjoy the wealth he'd spent 40 years building. She told him about her former students, about the garden she was planning for next spring, about the small pleasures of ordinary life. "I've been thinking," Sebastian said, as they shared tiramisu, about Tuscany. "There's a villa near Siena available for rent next month. 3 weeks in the Italian countryside, just us, no business, no family drama, no expectations. What do you think?" I think that sounds like something Eleanor Hartley from the south side of Chicago would never do. Exactly. So should we do it anyway? Eleanor looked at him across the table. This man who'd loved her 50 years ago and somehow never stopped, who'd walked back into her life at exactly the moment she needed him most, who saw value in her that she'd almost forgotten she had. Yes, she said. Let's do it anyway. They walked after dinner, strolling through downtown as evening deepened into night. The city glittered around them, all light and movement and possibility. Sebastian took her hand, and it felt natural, right? Like something that should have been happening all along. Eleanor, I need to tell you something, he said as they paused by the river, watching boats drift past. I've wasted a lot of my life being angry about what we lost. Angry at your mother, angry at circumstances, angry at time itself for taking away our chance. But sitting here with you now, I realize something. We didn't lose our chance. We just took a long detour to get back to it. That's a nice way of looking at 50 years apart. It's the only way I can look at it without regret consuming me. We lived different lives, learned different lessons, became different people. Maybe we're better suited for each other now than we would have been at 20. Or maybe we're just old enough to know what we're losing if we let this slip away again. That too. He turned to face her, serious now. I'm not proposing. Not yet. But Eleanor, I want you to know my intentions are serious. I want whatever time we have left to be spent together, building something real. Not trying to recreate what we had, but creating something new from who we are now. I want that too, Eleanor said, and meant it with her whole heart. They stood by the river as the city moved around them. Two old people who'd found each other again, against all odds, who'd survived loss and loneliness, and decades of wondering what if, who were finally ready to write a different ending to their story. Eleanor's phone buzzed in her purse. A text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Montgomery. I owe you an apology, a real one, not the kind I gave before. Would you be willing to meet for coffee next week? Just us. No agenda, except honesty. Eleanor showed Sebastian the message. He raised his eyebrows. What are you going to say? I'm going to say yes, because holding grudges takes energy I'd rather spend on better things. And because maybe, just maybe, people can change if they want to badly enough. She typed back, Tuesday at 10, the diner on 5th Street. My choice of location this time. Patricia's response came quickly. Agreed, thank you. Look at you, Sebastian said, smiling, teaching Chicago society how to be human one coffee date at a time. Someone has to do it. They walked back to his car, hands linked, taking their time, because there was no rush, no pressure, nothing but time stretching ahead and the promise of possibility. At Eleanor's door, Sebastian kissed her properly this time, not a chaste peck, but a real kiss, the kind that promised more to come. Tuscany next month, he said. Don't back out on me. I won't. I'm done backing out of things that scare me. Even marriage to a stubborn old businessman with more money than sense. Is that a proposal? It's a preview of coming attractions. Eleanor laughed and went inside, floating on air, feeling young and foolish and gloriously alive. She made tea and sat by her window looking out at the street, at the ordinary neighborhood where she'd built her ordinary life, and thought about how sometimes extraordinary things happen to ordinary people, not because they're special, but because they finally let themselves believe they could be. Tuesday morning arrived with rain, the steady summer kind that drums on rooftops and makes everything smell like earth and possibility. Eleanor arrived at the diner 15 minutes early, claiming a booth by the window where she could watch the street. She ordered coffee and waited, wondering if Patricia would actually show, or if this was some elaborate power play she didn't understand yet. At exactly 10 o'clock, a black town car pulled up. Patricia emerged without an umbrella, letting the rain soak into her probably expensive blouse as she hurried inside. Her hair was down, no careful styling, and she wore jeans and a simple sweater. Eleanor had never seen her look so normal, so human. Patricia slid into the booth across from her, water dripping from her hair onto the table. I almost didn't come. Sat in my car for 20 minutes convincing myself this was necessary. What changed your mind? My daughter called me last night. told me she's in therapy working through issues I apparently gave her, issues about self-worth and measuring people by their possessions and being terrified of not being perfect. Patricia's voice cracked. She said she doesn't want to be like me anymore. My own daughter doesn't want to be like me. The waitress appeared with menus. Patricia ordered coffee black, her hands shaking slightly as she set down the laminated menu. Eleanor waited, knowing this needed to unfold at its own pace. "I've been thinking about what you said," Patricia continued, "about how I measure people, about what I've taught Vivian, and I realized you were right. I've built my entire identity around status and appearance and maintaining this image of perfection. And underneath it all, I'm miserable. We're all miserable. My husband drinks too much. My daughter's in therapy. My marriage is a performance we put on for business associates. And I did that. I created that world and trapped us all in it. So why are you here? What do you want from me?" "I don't know." Patricia wiped her eyes with a paper napkin. "Maybe I want you to tell me it's not too late to change. Maybe I want permission to be different. Maybe I just needed to sit across from someone who built a real life instead of a facade and figure out how you did it." Eleanor sipped her coffee, studying this woman who'd been so cruel to her just days ago. Patricia looked smaller now, diminished by honesty in a way power never could diminish her. "You want to know my secret? I didn't have a choice. I couldn't afford facades or performances. I had to be real, because real was all I could manage." Eleanor set down her cup. "When Thomas died and I had to raise Marcus alone on a teacher's salary, I couldn't pretend to be anything other than a widowed mother struggling to make ends meet. And somewhere in that struggle, I learned that authenticity isn't a luxury. It's the only way to actually live." "But you gave up so much. Opportunity, comfort, security." "I gave up what I didn't have to begin with. You're the one who has something to lose, Patricia. And that's terrifying, I get it. Walking away from wealth and status and everything you've built feels impossible. But staying where you are, being who you've been, that's killing you slowly. I can see it in your face." Patricia was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't bother wiping away. "I don't know how to be anyone else. This is all I know." "Then learn. Start small. Start by being honest with one person about one thing. Build from there." Eleanor reached across the table an offer of connection. "And maybe start by actually getting to know your daughter-in-law instead of judging her. Marcus told Richard last night that they're moving out of the condo we bought them. Said they need distance from our family to figure out who they are." Patricia took Eleanor's offered hand. "Richard is furious, talking about cutting Marcus off completely. But I realized if we do that, we lose them. We lose any chance of having real relationships with our daughter and her husband. And for what pride? The illusion of control. So what are you going to do?" "I told Richard this morning that I'm done. Done with the pretending, done with the social climbing, done with sacrificing real connection for fake prestige. He can stay in that world if he wants, but I'm choosing differently." Patricia squeezed Eleanor's hand. "I'm choosing to try, even though I have no idea what I'm doing or how to do it." And they talked for 2 hours, coffee growing cold, and then being refilled, rain continuing its steady rhythm against the windows. Patricia asked questions about Eleanor's life, really asked, really listened. "How did you manage on so little? How did you find meaning without status? How did you raise a good son while working 2 jobs?" The questions came from genuine curiosity, from a woman trying to understand a completely foreign way of living. And Eleanor answered honestly, not sugarcoating the struggles or the loneliness, not pretending poverty was noble or that sacrifice didn't cost her. She talked about eating ramen for dinner so Marcus could have meat, about wearing the same winter coat for 8 years, about the exhaustion of working full-time and then coming home to a child who needed help with homework and someone to read him bedtime stories. "But I had something you don't," Eleanor said. "I had purpose. Every sacrifice had meaning because it was for Marcus, for his future." What are you sacrificing for, Patricia? What gives your life meaning beyond maintaining appearances? Patricia didn't have an answer. That silence said everything. When they finally left the diner, the rain had stopped. Patricia paused on the sidewalk car waiting at the curb and turned back to Eleanor. Would you consider, would it be possible for us to do this again? Meet for coffee talk. Are you asking me to be your friend? I'm asking you to help me learn how to be human instead of just wealthy, if that's not too much to ask. Eleanor considered this woman who'd been her enemy, who'd humiliated her, who was now standing in front of her, looking lost and hopeful in equal measure. She thought about grace and second chances, and the complicated reality that people could change if they wanted to, badly enough. Tuesday mornings, same time, same place. But Patricia, I'm not going to teach you how to be me. I'm going to push you to figure out who you actually are underneath all the programming, and that's going to be uncomfortable. I think I need uncomfortable right now. Patricia managed a small smile. Thank you, Eleanor, for not slamming the door in my face. I've had too many doors slammed in mine to do that to someone else. Eleanor walked home through puddles, her shoes getting soaked, but not caring. The air smelled clean and new rain-washed and full of promise. She was building something she'd never expected, a life that included second-chance romance and unlikely friendships and possibilities she'd stopped believing in years ago. At home, she found a package on her porch. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a note from Sebastian in his precise handwriting. For documenting our adventures. First entry should be about Tuscany. We leave in 3 weeks. I've already booked the villa. Say yes, or I'll show up at your door until you do. Eleanor laughed and carried the journal inside. She made tea and sat at her kitchen table, opening to the first blank page. For a long moment she just stared at it, thinking about all the blank pages she'd left unfilled in her life, all the adventures she'd said no to because they seemed impractical or impossible or not meant for someone like her. Then she picked up a pen and wrote, "Today I learned that it's never too late to say yes." That evening, Marcus and Vivian came over for dinner, the first time they'd all sat down together since the wedding. Vivian had brought flowers, simple daisies from a grocery store, not an expensive arrangement, but something real and chosen with thought. "I know these don't make up for anything," Vivian said, handing them to Eleanor. "But my therapist said meaningful relationships require meaningful gestures, and I'm trying to learn what that means." Eleanor put them in a mason jar, the best vase she had. They looked perfect on her kitchen table, bright and unpretentious and somehow exactly right. Over pot roast and mashed potatoes, simple food that Eleanor had been making for decades, they talked, really talked, not the careful surface conversation from before, but messy, honest dialogue about hurt and regret and the hard work of change. "My mother called me today," Vivian said, pushing peas around her plate. "She said she had coffee with you, said you were surprisingly kind considering how she'd treated you." "I was honest, not necessarily kind. There's a difference. She said you offered to keep meeting with her to help her figure things out." Vivian looked up, eyes questioning. "Why would you do that? After everything?" "Because holding on to anger takes energy. I'd rather spend elsewhere. And because your mother is struggling even if she's been terrible at showing it. Sometimes people need help becoming better versions of themselves." Eleanor passed the serving bowl to Marcus. "Plus, if she actually changes, if she learns to treat people with basic decency, then my grandchildren might actually have a grandmother worth knowing." Marcus nearly choked on his water. "Grandchildren, Mom. We've only been married a week." "I'm not getting any younger, just putting it out there." They all laughed, and the tension broke conversation, flowing more easily after that. Vivian asked about Eleanor's garden, and actually listened to the answer. Marcus talked about work without the usual anxiety about impressing anyone. Eleanor told them about the Tuscany trip, watching their reactions shift from surprise to genuine happiness. "You're going to Italy with Sebastian Whitmore," Vivian said slowly. "For 3 weeks. That's serious. At my age, everything's serious. Don't have time not to be." Eleanor stood to clear plates. "He asked me to marry him. Well, sort of. Said it was a preview of coming attractions." And Marcus looked like a child again, hopeful and nervous about his mother's happiness. "And I'm considering it. We're taking the Italy trip first, seeing how 3 weeks together goes. If we don't kill each other, maybe we'll make it official." "Mom, that's incredible. You deserve this. You deserve all of it." After dinner, they sat in Eleanor's small living room drinking coffee, and Vivian asked the question Eleanor had been waiting for. How do you forgive people? Real forgiveness, not just saying the words. You don't forgive all at once. It's not a switch you flip. It's a choice you make over and over, day after day, to not let the hurt define your relationship anymore. Eleanor set down her cup. And sometimes you don't forgive completely. Sometimes you just decide to move forward anyway, carrying a small scar, but not letting it stop you from building something new. Have you forgiven me? Eleanor looked at her daughter-in-law, this young woman trying so hard to unlearn a lifetime of terrible lessons. I'm working on it. Ask me again in 6 months when I see what kind of person you've become. That's fair? No, it's honest. Fair would be easier. They left near 10 Marcus, hugging Eleanor tight and whispering, I'm proud of you, Mom. Proud of how strong you've been through all this. I learned from the best, Eleanor said. Your father always said strength isn't about never breaking. It's about how you put yourself back together afterward. Alone again, Eleanor cleaned up from dinner and thought about Thomas, about the good man who'd loved her steadily, if not spectacularly. She found herself talking to him the way she sometimes did when the house was quiet. I think you'd like Sebastian. He's nothing like you, but I think you'd respect him. And Thomas, I hope you wouldn't be hurt that I'm letting myself love someone new. You've been gone 10 years, and I've been so lonely. So lonely I forgot I was lonely because it became normal. But I don't want to be lonely anymore. She imagined his response kind and generous as he'd always been. He'd want her happy. He'd tell her to stop overthinking and just live. The next week passed in a blur of preparation for Italy. Eleanor, who'd barely left Chicago in 40 years, suddenly needed a passport renewal and new luggage and clothes appropriate for Italian summer. Mrs. Chen appointed herself styling consultant, dragging Eleanor to discount stores and teaching her how to mix and match pieces to look European chic on a teacher's pension. You're going to Italy with a billionaire, Mrs. Chen said, holding up various scarves. You need to look good, but not like you're trying too hard. Effortless elegance, that's the key. I'm 68 years old. Nothing about me is effortless anymore. Nonsense. You have good bones and better posture than women half your age. We just need to update your wardrobe from 1985. They found simple pieces in natural fabrics, comfortable walking shoes that didn't look orthopedic, a good leather purse that would last. Nothing expensive, but all chosen with care. And when Eleanor looked at herself in the dressing room mirror, she saw someone ready for adventure. Sebastian called every evening, their conversations ranging from logistics to philosophy to stories about their separate lives. He told her about business deals and board meetings and the loneliness of success without connection. She told him about her students over the years, about the joy of watching someone learn to read, about the quiet satisfaction of ordinary work done well. I've built an empire, Sebastian said one night. Skyscrapers with my name on them, foundations funding important work influence in rooms where decisions get made. But Eleanor, I'd trade it all for what you have. The knowledge that you directly changed lives. That kids learn to read because of you. That's real wealth. Don't romanticize it too much. I was tired and underpaid and sometimes wondered if I was making any difference at all. But you were. That's the point. Real change happens in classrooms and living rooms and ordinary moments. I've been writing checks my whole life. You've been changing the world one child at a time. 5 days before they were scheduled to leave, Patricia showed up at Eleanor's door unannounced, face blotchy from crying. Richard left, she said without preamble. Moved into his club, said I've lost my mind and he's not going to watch me throw away everything we've built. Eleanor pulled her inside. Sit, I'll make tea. I don't want tea. I want my life back, the safe one where I knew the rules and my place in them. Patricia collapsed on the sofa. I told him I wanted to simplify, to spend less, to actually get to know our daughter, instead of just managing her image. And he looked at me like I'd suggested we move to a commune and raise goats. What do you want, Patricia, really want, not what you think you should want? I want to breathe. I want to stop performing every second of every day. I want to have a conversation that isn't about status or money or who knows whom. I want what you have, Eleanor, a real life. Real life isn't easy. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you eat ramen for dinner because that's what you can afford. You sure you want that? Patricia looked up, mascara smudged and hair disheveled, looking more genuine than Eleanor had ever seen her. I have no idea what I want, except I know I can't keep living the way I have been. It's killing me. Slowly but surely, it's erasing whoever I used to be before I became Mrs. Richard Montgomery. They talked until after midnight, Eleanor sharing hard truths about what leaving wealth behind actually meant, Patricia asking questions about practical things like budgeting and shopping at discount stores and living without household staff. It should have been absurd teaching a millionaire how to live like a normal person, but somehow it wasn't. It was just two women trying to figure out how to build authentic lives. "Stay here tonight," Eleanor said finally. "Guest room's small, but the bed's clean. In the morning, we'll figure out next steps." I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. You're accepting help, which is different. And Patricia, that's lesson 1. Real relationships involve letting people help you sometimes. The next morning, Eleanor made pancakes while Patricia sat at the kitchen table looking lost in borrowed pajamas. Vivian called around 8 frantic because her mother wasn't answering her phone. "She's here," Eleanor said. "She's fine." She needed somewhere to think. "She left my father. He called me at midnight ranting about prenups and asset division, and I couldn't make sense of any of it." "Your mother is figuring some things out. Give her space to do it." When Vivian and Marcus arrived an hour later, Eleanor excused herself to give them privacy. She worked in her garden while voices drifted through the open kitchen window, not loud enough to make out words, but the emotional timbre clear. Confusion, hurt, concern. But underneath it all, something that sounded like hope. Marcus found her among the tomatoes. "Is this really happening? Vivian's mother is actually leaving her father?" "I think she's trying to find herself. Whether that means leaving permanently or just taking space, I don't know. But Marcus, sometimes people need to fall apart before they can put themselves back together, right? Did you ever want to leave Dad when things were hard?" Eleanor sat back on her heels, considering. "No. Thomas was my safe harbor in a storm, but I'll tell you something I've never told anyone. Sometimes I wondered what my life would have been like if your grandmother hadn't hidden Sebastian's letters, if I'd gotten to choose instead of having the choice stolen from me. And that wondering that what if it took up space in my marriage that should have belonged to Thomas. I loved your father, but part of me was always looking backward, grieving a path not taken. That's what I'm afraid of with Vivian, that I'll always wonder if we made it work because we actually love each other or just because we were too stubborn to admit we'd made a mistake. Then you keep doing the work, therapy and honesty, and choosing each other every day even when it's hard. That's what marriage is, Marcus, not the wedding day. The days after, when reality sets in and you have to decide if you're going to build something real or just coast on momentum. Inside, Vivian was helping her mother pack the overnight bag someone had brought from the Montgomery house. Patricia looked fragile but determined, a woman standing at a crossroads, finally ready to choose her own direction. "I'm staying with Vivian and Marcus for a while," Patricia announced. "They're moving into that condo anyway, might as well not waste it. And I need space from Richard to figure out who I am separate from being his wife." "That takes courage," Eleanor said. "Or stupidity. I'm not sure which yet. Maybe both. The best decisions usually require a little of each." After they left, Eleanor sat in her quiet house and thought about all the ways lives can transform when people finally get brave enough to tell the truth. Patricia leaving her marriage, Marcus and Vivian fighting to build something real, Eleanor herself preparing to go to Italy with a man she'd loved 50 years ago. All of it terrifying, all of it necessary. Sebastian called that afternoon. "I heard about the Montgomery situation. Richard's been calling mutual acquaintances, trying to rally support for his position." "What are people saying? That Patricia's having a breakdown, that you've been a terrible influence, that I'm enabling chaos for my own amusement?" He sounded more amused than concerned. the usual nonsense people say when they're afraid of change. Are we terrible influences? Are we enabling chaos? We're helping people wake up from lives that were slowly suffocating them. If that's chaos, then I'm all for it. He paused. Speaking of which, I moved our Italy departure up by 2 days. Figured you could use some distance from all the drama here. Sebastian, I have responsibilities, people who need me. And they'll still need you when you get back. Eleanor, when was the last time you put yourself first? When was the last time you said yes to something purely because it would make you happy? She thought about it and couldn't remember. Even the decision to go to Italy had been tangled up with considering Marcus's feelings and worrying about propriety and wondering what people would think. That's what I thought, Sebastian said gently. Pack your bags. Car picks you up Friday at noon. We're going to spend 3 weeks being completely selfish, and I'm not apologizing for it. Eleanor hung up and did something radical. She called Marcus and told him she was leaving sooner. Told Vivian that Patricia would need support, but Eleanor couldn't provide it because she was choosing herself for once. Told Mrs. Chen to keep an eye on the house and not to call unless it was an actual emergency. Then she finished packing, going through the new clothes and trying to imagine herself wearing them in an Italian villa, drinking wine and eating pasta and having long conversations with a man who saw her as more than just mother or teacher or helper. Trying to imagine herself as simply Eleanor. Just Eleanor. Finally, blessedly Eleanor. Thursday night, she couldn't sleep, too excited and nervous like a child before Christmas. She got up around 2 and sat in her kitchen drinking tea, looking at photos from her life. Thomas young and smiling. Marcus as a baby. Her students over the years, all those faces she'd taught to love reading. A good life, a meaningful life, but one that had always been about other people. I'm scared, she said out loud to the empty room, to Thomas's memory, to whoever might be listening. I'm 68 years old, and I'm scared of being happy because I don't know how to do it without feeling guilty, without feeling like I'm abandoning responsibilities or being selfish or forgetting what matters. The house settled around her familiar creaks and the hum of the refrigerator sounds she'd lived with for 44 years, and somehow in that familiar quiet, she felt release. Permission to go, permission to choose joy. Permission to be more than the sum of her sacrifices. Friday morning arrived bright and clear. Eleanor dressed carefully in travel clothes, comfortable but put together, and stood in front of her mirror taking inventory. Not young, not conventionally beautiful, but alive, present, ready. The car arrived at exactly noon. Sebastian got out himself, looking relaxed in casual clothes, and the smile he gave her held 50 years of waiting. Ready? Terrified. Perfect. That means you're alive. He took her suitcase, placed it in the trunk, then opened her door. Next stop, adventure. Eleanor looked back at her small house one more time, at the life she'd built there, at the ordinary neighborhood that had held her ordinary existence. Then she got in the car and didn't look back again. As they drove toward the airport, Sebastian reached over and took her hand. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for asking, for not giving up, for showing up at that wedding and reminding me I'm worth more than row 14. You were always worth more, Eleanor. I just helped you remember. The villa sat on a hillside overlooking vineyards that stretched toward distant mountains, all golden light and ancient stone, and the kind of beauty Eleanor had only seen in paintings. Sebastian carried her bag up the worn steps, while she stood in the courtyard trying to process that this was real, that she was actually here, that at 68 she was starting something completely new. It's too much, she said, voice small. Sebastian, this is too much. It's exactly enough. He set down the luggage and came to stand beside her. Eleanor, I've spent 50 years being too much for everyone else, too ambitious, too driven, too focused on building empires. Let me be exactly enough for you. They spent the first 2 days just existing together, learning each other's rhythms again. Morning coffee on this terrace while light climbed the hills. Long walks through vineyards where workers called out greetings in Italian. Simple dinners prepared in the villa's kitchen, nothing fancy, just good food and wine and conversation that ranged everywhere. On the third morning, Eleanor's phone rang. Marcus, his voice tight with stress. "Mom, I need you to come home. Everything's falling apart. Vivian's mother is having a complete breakdown, her father's threatening legal action, and Vivian's caught in the middle, and I don't know how to help her." Eleanor walked to the terrace railing, looking out at the peaceful landscape. "What do you want me to do, Marcus?" "Come back. Talk to Patricia. Help us figure this out. You're the only one who seems to know how to navigate all this." "No." The word came out firm, surprising both of them. "What? No, Marcus. I'm not coming back to manage everyone else's crisis. I spent 40 years being the person who fixed things and smoothed things over and made sure everyone else was okay. I'm in Italy with Sebastian, and I'm choosing to stay here." Silence on the other end then. "But Mom, we need you. You're 35 years old. Vivian's 32. Patricia's a grown woman who made her own choices. You don't need me. You need to figure it out yourselves." Eleanor's hand tightened on the phone. "I love you, Marcus, but I'm not coming home early. Call if it's an actual emergency. Otherwise, handle it." She hung up before he could protest, heart pounding. Sebastian appeared with fresh coffee. That sounded hard. It was. I've never said no to him before, not when he really asked for something. Eleanor took the offered cup, hands shaking slightly. "I feel terrible, like I'm abandoning him." "You're not abandoning him. You're letting him grow up. There's a difference." Sebastian sat beside her. "He'll figure it out. And he'll be stronger for having to do it himself instead of relying on you to save everyone." "What if I'm being selfish? What if Patricia actually needs professional help and I'm not there? Then Marcus will get her professional help. Eleanor, you're not responsible for Patricia's breakdown or Vivian's stress or anyone else's inability to cope. You're allowed to be in Italy. You're allowed to choose yourself." She knew he was right, but guilt sat heavy anyway, familiar and comfortable as an old coat. Over the next few days, she checked her phone compulsively, expecting crisis calls that never came. Instead, she got occasional texts from Marcus updating her. Patricia had found a therapist. Vivian had taken a leave from her job to focus on her mental health. They were managing without her. The realization hit Eleanor one morning while she was drinking coffee and watching sunrise paint the vineyards gold. They didn't need her. They were handling it. And she felt relieved instead of hurt, liberated instead of rejected. "I think I've been hiding," she told Sebastian over breakfast. "Hiding behind being needed. As long as everyone required my help, I had an excuse not to figure out what I wanted." "And what do you want, Eleanor Hartley?" She looked at him across the table. This man who'd waited half a century and felt something shift inside her, like a key turning in a long-locked door. "I want this. I want you. I want to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world." Sebastian reached across and took her hand. "Then stop apologizing and start living." That afternoon, they drove to a small village market where vendors sold cheese and wine and vegetables still dusty from the fields. Eleanor bought ingredients for dinner, haggling with an old woman over the price of tomatoes in broken Italian, supplemented with wild gestures. The woman laughed and threw in extra basil, patting Eleanor's cheek and saying something that probably meant foolish American tourist, but with such warmth that Eleanor didn't care. Back at the villa, cooking together in the sun-washed kitchen, Sebastian told her about the years after she'd married Thomas. "I threw myself into work, built my first company, sold it, built another. Made my first $1 million by 30, my first $100 million by 40. And every success felt hollow because the person I wanted to share it with was living a different life with someone else." "Did you really never marry? Never find someone else?" "I dated. Even got engaged once to a woman who seemed perfect on paper. Investment banker, brilliant, beautiful. But Eleanor, I couldn't do it. The morning of what was supposed to be a celebration dinner, I looked at her and realized I was comparing her to you, still comparing everyone to a girl I'd loved 50 years ago. So I called it off, apologized, paid for the therapy. She probably needed after dealing with my emotional unavailability and accepted that some parts of us never move on." "That's sad, Sebastian. All those years alone." Not as sad as marrying someone while wishing they were you." He added olive oil to the pan, the scent filling the kitchen. "I made peace with it. Built a good life, meaningful work, real friendships. But the romantic part of me never woke up again. Not until I saw your name in that wedding announcement, and something in me said, maybe there's still time." They ate dinner on the terrace as twilight settled, fireflies beginning their evening dance. Eleanor felt wine-warm and content in a way she couldn't remember feeling before. Not happy in the sense of excitement or achievement, but settled, peaceful, exactly where she belonged. "I want to tell you something," she said, setting down her glass. "Something I've never told anyone, not even Thomas." Sebastian waited, patient as always. "When I married Thomas, part of me hoped you'd show up at the wedding, burst through the doors and object, and give me a reason to choose differently. I stood at that altar in my borrowed dress, and I kept glancing at the back of the church, waiting for you." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You didn't come. Of course you didn't come. You had no idea I was even getting married. But I blamed you anyway. Spent years angry at you for not saving me from a choice I was making myself. Did you love him, Thomas? Yes. Just not the way I loved you. With Thomas, it was comfortable and safe, and eventually that felt like enough, because the alternative was being alone and terrified about money and raising Marcus by myself. We built a good life. He was kind to me, patient with my moods, accepting of the fact that part of me was always elsewhere. He deserved better. We all deserved better. Better timing, better communication, better luck. But we got what we got, and we survived it." Sebastian refilled their glasses. "Now the question is, what do we do with whatever time we have left?" Before Eleanor could answer, her phone buzzed. Vivian this time, a long text message that started with an apology and ended with a question that made Eleanor's breath catch. "Marcus proposed that we renew our vows, a real ceremony this time, small and meaningful with people we actually care about. Would you be willing to help me plan it? Not as a task, but as something we do together. I want to learn from you, Eleanor. Learn how to build something real." Eleanor showed Sebastian the message. He read it and smiled. "Your daughter-in-law is trying." "She is. They both are." Eleanor typed back slowly. "I'd be honored. When I get back, let's have coffee and talk about what matters to both of you. Build something authentic." The reply came quickly, 3 words and a heart emoji. "Thank you. Love you." Eleanor stared in those words, "love you," from the woman who'd put her in row 14 barely 3 weeks ago. People really do change, don't they? When they want to badly enough, when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of being different. They moved inside as night deepened the villa warm with lamplight. Sebastian put on musical jazz that reminded Eleanor of college, of dancing in tiny apartments and believing the world was full of possibility. He held out his hand. "Dance with me. I'm 68 years old with bad knees and no rhythm. Perfect. I'm 70 with a replaced hip, and I never had rhythm to begin with. We're evenly matched." They swayed together in the living room, Eleanor's head on his shoulder, and she felt tears slip free without really knowing why. Not sad tears exactly. Release maybe, or relief, or the overwhelming realization that after all these years she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Marry me," Sebastian said quietly against her hair. "Not someday. Not when we get back. Now here in Italy, where we can start completely fresh." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything. Eleanor, we've wasted 50 years waiting for the right time. This is the right time. This is the only time we're guaranteed." His eyes were bright and tense. "I don't want careful or practical. I want you. I want us. I want to spend whatever time we have left proving that sometimes love does get a second chance." "What about our families, our responsibilities? What about them? Marcus is an adult. My companies run themselves. Your garden will survive without you. And all the reasons to say no are just fear dressed up as practicality." He cupped her face in his hands. "Be brave with me one more time. Say yes to something crazy and impulsive and completely right." Eleanor thought about row 14, about sitting in that cold chair believing she was worth nothing. about Sebastian appearing beside her and changing everything, about learning to choose herself instead of always choosing what other people needed from her. "Yes," she said. "Yes, let's get married in Italy, like fools in love." They married 3 days later in the village church, small and ancient, with frescoes fading on the walls and candles burning in the cool interior. The priest spoke Italian, but the meaning translated through his kind eyes and gentle hands as he blessed them. Eleanor wore a simple cream dress bought at the village market. Sebastian wore the same khakis and blue shirt from their first date, rolled sleeves and all. They had no witnesses except the priest's wife who cried happy tears and the old woman from the market who'd sold Eleanor tomatoes. No photographer except Sebastian's phone propped on a pew. No reception except wine and bread at the villa afterward. Nothing fancy or impressive or designed for anyone's approval. Just two old people promising to love each other for whatever time they had left. When Eleanor called Marcus that evening to tell him he was silent for so long, she thought the connection had dropped. "Marcus, are you there?" "I'm here, just processing. My mother just got married in Italy without telling anyone she was planning to." "Are you angry?" "I'm happy for you, Mom. Genuinely happy. Also a little hurt you didn't invite me, but mostly happy." He sighed. "Vivian's going to be devastated she missed another wedding, though." "Tell her there's a vow renewal in her future. She can help plan that one." "You're really doing this, starting over at 68. "I'm not starting over, honey. I'm starting fresh. There's a difference. Starting over implies I'm erasing what came before. Starting fresh means I'm building on everything I learned but choosing different." Eleanor looked at Sebastian across the terrace, her husband now, and marveled at how strange and right that word felt. "I love you, Marcus. I'm sorry if this feels sudden or thoughtless, but I'm learning to choose joy even when it seems impractical. Then I'm learning too, from you." His voice thickened. "Dad would be happy for you. He'd want this." After they hung up, Eleanor sat with that truth. Thomas would want this, would want her happy and loved and living fully instead of carefully. He'd been a good man who'd given her a good life, and part of honoring that was refusing to spend the rest of her years alone and scared of possibility. "No regrets?" Sebastian asked, joining her with fresh wine. "Hundreds of regrets. Just none about this." They stayed in Italy for 2 more weeks, settling into married life with surprising ease. Morning routines emerged naturally, Sebastian making coffee while Eleanor checked email, then breakfast together, before long walks through olive groves. Afternoons reading in companionable silence, evenings cooking and talking, and slowly building the kind of intimacy that comes from truly being known. Eleanor called Patricia once, checking on her progress. Patricia sounded different, lighter somehow, despite the chaos of her life. "I moved into my own apartment. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park. Richard's furious, but his fury doesn't control me anymore." Patricia laughed, a sound Eleanor had never heard from her before, genuine and unguarded. "I bought my own groceries yesterday. Stood in the produce section for 20 minutes, trying to figure out how to pick a good avocado. It was terrifying and thrilling." "You'll figure it out." "I know. With your help and therapy and time." "Eleanor, I need you to know something. You saved my life. Not literally, but in every way that matters. You showed me it was possible to live differently." "I just showed you what I knew. You're doing the hard work yourself." When they finally flew back to Chicago, Eleanor felt different. Settled in her skin in a way she'd never been before. Not because marriage had completed her or Sebastian had fixed her, but because she'd finally given herself permission to be fully present in her own life. Marcus and Vivian picked them up at the airport, and the hug Marcus gave Eleanor was fierce enough to hurt. "I missed you," he said into her shoulder. "I didn't realize how much I relied on you being available until you weren't." "Good. That means you grew up a little while I was gone." At Eleanor's house that evening, they all gathered for dinner. Patricia showed up with store-bought cookies instead of catered desserts, proud of this small gesture toward normalcy. Vivian had cooked, not hired it done, and though the chicken was dry and the vegetables overcooked, no one cared because the effort mattered more than the execution. "I've been thinking," Vivian said as they cleared plates, "about the vow renewal, and I don't want it at Ashford Manor or anywhere fancy. I want it in your backyard, Eleanor. with folding chairs and flowers from your garden, and real food that people actually eat instead of small plates that look pretty. You sure your mother's family will think you've lost your mind? Let them. I'm done living for their approval. Vivian glanced at Patricia, who nodded encouragement. I want something real, something that honors who we actually are instead of who we're trying to impress. They planned it right there at Eleanor's kitchen table, making lists on paper napkins and laughing at ideas that were too silly and championing ones that felt right. 50 guests maximum, barbecue instead of formal dinner. Marcus's college roommate, who was an amateur guitarist providing music, vows they'd write themselves about truth and growth and choosing each other daily. And proper seating for my mother, Marcus added, squeezing Eleanor's hand. Front row center where she belongs. Eleanor felt tears prick, but held them back. I'd like to invite Sebastian's family too, his sister and her kids. They should see him this happy. The more the merrier, Vivian said. This is about building community, not showing off status. After everyone left, Eleanor and Sebastian stood in her small backyard where the vow renewal would happen. The garden was overgrown from 3 weeks of neglect, but still beautiful in its wildness. Are you happy? Sebastian asked. Really happy, not just saying you are. Eleanor considered the question seriously. I'm scared and uncertain and don't quite believe this is real. But underneath all that, yes, I'm happy. Happier than I've been since before Thomas died. Maybe happier than I've ever been because this time I chose it, instead of it happening to me. What changed between row 14 and now what actually changed? I remembered I'm allowed to take up space, that my needs matter, that choosing myself isn't selfish, it's necessary. She turned to face him. You helped me remember that. You and that ridiculous gesture of sitting beside me when you could have been anywhere else. Best decision I ever made. Second best. Eleanor smiled. First best was finding your way back to me after 50 years. They went inside, and Eleanor made tea, slipping back into the comfortable rhythms of her own space, but now with someone to share it. Sebastian fit into her small house like he'd always been there, reading in Thomas's old chair, helping with dishes, existing beside her without needing to fill every silence with conversation. That night, lying in bed in the room she'd slept in alone for 10 years, Eleanor reached for Sebastian's hand in the dark. I used to be so lonely, I couldn't feel it anymore. It was just background noise, constant companion I'd learned to ignore. But lying here with you, I remember what it's like to not be lonely. And it's almost overwhelming. Overwhelming good or overwhelming scary? Both. Everything's both now. Good and scary, joy and terror, peace and chaos all mixed together. I don't know if I'm ready for this much feeling after so many years of numbness. Sebastian rolled toward her, his hand finding her face in the darkness. Then we'll figure it out together. Take it slow when we need to rush forward when it feels right, muddle through when we have no idea what we're doing. That's what partners do. Partners? Eleanor tested the word. I like that better than husband and wife. Partners implies equality. You were always my equal, Eleanor, even when you were sitting in row 14, especially then. The vow renewal happened on a Saturday in early September when summer was just starting to let go. They set up folding chairs in Eleanor's backyard, simple white ones from a rental company, and covered them with cushions Mrs. Chen had sewn. Flowers from Eleanor's garden filled mason jars on tables borrowed from the church basement. Sebastian had hired a small catering company, but insisted on comfort food barbecue and coleslaw and cornbread, the kind of meal people actually ate. 53 people showed up, an odd mix of Marcus's college friends and Vivian's small circle of genuine relationships, and Eleanor's former colleagues and Sebastian's business associates who seemed bemused to be at a backyard barbecue. Patricia came with a man Eleanor didn't recognize, introduced as her therapist's recommendation for a good divorce attorney who'd become a friend during the process. I'm dating, Patricia whispered to Eleanor before the ceremony. Actually dating, not strategically networking. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Welcome to the club. None of us know what we're doing. The ceremony itself was short and honest. Vivian and Marcus standing under an arbor Sebastian had built from Eleanor's garden wood. They read vows about commitment and growth and the hard work of choosing each other daily, about learning to be honest even when it was uncomfortable, about building something real instead of something impressive. When they exchanged new rings, simple bands they'd chosen together, Eleanor saw Marcus crying openly, so different from the perfectly composed groom at Ashford Manor barely 2 months ago. This version was real, vulnerable, fully present instead of performing. "I'm proud of you," Eleanor told him afterward during the reception while Vivian talked with Patricia. "Proud of the man you're becoming instead of the one you were trying to be. I learned from watching you, Mom, watching you choose yourself, even when it was hard, watching you refuse to keep making yourself small for other people's comfort." Marcus hugged her tight. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." As evening settled and lights came on in the trees as people ate barbecue and drank beer and talked without pretense, Eleanor stood with Sebastian watching it all, simple and imperfect and completely genuine, the opposite of that wedding at Ashford Manor, the opposite of row 14. "Look what you started," Sebastian said. "One woman refusing to be invisible changed all of this." "I didn't start anything. I just stopped accepting less than I deserved." "That's exactly what you started. A revolution of self-respect." Eleanor looked at the people scattered across her small backyard, all of them finding their way toward authenticity in different ways. Patricia learning to live without wealth defining her. Vivian and Marcus building something real. Sebastian finally sharing his life instead of building empires alone. And Eleanor herself no longer the invisible woman in row 14, but the center of her own story. "You know what I realized," Eleanor said. "That wedding being put in the back row, it was the best thing that could have happened, because it cracked something open, made me face how much I'd been accepting, how small I'd been making myself. If they'd treated me well, I might have kept pretending everything was fine, kept accepting crumbs and calling it enough. So you're grateful. I'm grateful for what came after, for you showing up, for finding my backbone, for learning that I matter not because someone else says so, but because I choose to believe it." Eleanor turned to face him. "I'm grateful for this, for us, for second chances and backyard barbecues and simple truth instead of complicated pretense." And the party wound down near 11 guests, drifting away with full stomachs and genuine smiles. Marcus and Vivian left for a simple honeymoon, just a long weekend at a cabin in Wisconsin. Nothing elaborate. Patricia hugged Eleanor goodbye and promised their next Tuesday coffee date. "Same time, same diner," Patricia said, "and I'm paying this time." "Deal." After everyone had gone, Eleanor and Sebastian cleaned up together, a peaceful end to a good day. They washed dishes and folded chairs and carried tables back to Sebastian's car for return tomorrow. Simple work, companionable silence, the kind of ordinary intimacy that makes a life. Later, sitting on Eleanor's porch in the dark with the remains of the party scattered around them, Sebastian asked the question Eleanor had been waiting for. "What now? We live here or my place, sell both, and buy something new. Split time between properties." Eleanor looked at her small house, the home she'd shared with Thomas, and raised Marcus in, where she'd been lonely and safe, and never quite enough until she learned to be. "I think we keep this house, use it as home base, but travel when we want, stay at your place when it makes sense, refuse to be defined by geography or routine." She reached for his hand. "I'm done with should and supposed to. Let's just build something that makes us happy without worrying whether it makes sense to anyone else." Radical idea for two septuagenarians. The most radical thing we can do at our age is refuse to act it. They sat in comfortable silence, the night settling around them with cricket song and distant traffic, and all the ambient noise of ordinary life continuing everywhere. Eleanor thought about the journey from row 14 to here, from invisible to essential, from forgotten to chosen. Not because someone rescued her, but because she'd rescued herself. Her phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but the message made her smile. "This is Catherine Montgomery, Vivian's great aunt. Sebastian gave me your number. I wanted to tell you that what you did standing up to my family's nonsense has inspired several of us to examine our own values. You sparked a conversation about what actually matters versus what we've been pretending matters. Thank you for your courage. Eleanor showed Sebastian. He laughed. Look at that. You're accidentally reforming Chicago society, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. Not reforming, just refusing to play their games. If that inspires them to question their values, good. But I'm not trying to fix anyone. That's what makes it so effective. You're not preaching. You're just living authentically, and it's highlighting how fake everyone else has been. More texts came over the next hour. Former students who'd heard about the wedding and wanted to congratulate her. Colleagues from Jefferson High planning a retirement party she'd never had. Mrs. Chen wanting to know if the ceremony went well, and did Patricia seem happy because she'd been worried about her. Each message a thread in a web of connection Eleanor had built without realizing it, relationships she'd nurtured through simply being present and honest and kind. Not trying to impress anyone, not measuring her worth by external standards, just living and teaching and helping where she could. I think I finally understand something, Eleanor said as midnight approached. About worth and value and why row 14 hurt so much. It wasn't actually about the seat. It was about me believing I belonged there, about me accepting that assessment of my value. The real change wasn't you showing up, Sebastian. It was me remembering I never should have sat down in the first place. You could have walked out. Could have, should have, but I was so programmed to accept how other people treated me that it didn't occur to me I had a choice. And maybe I needed to sit in that horrible seat for that horrible hour to get angry enough to change. They went inside, finally tired but content, and Eleanor locked her door on a day that had begun with fear and ended with peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose herself, new moments requiring courage. But tonight, she was enough. The house was enough. This simple life was enough. And somewhere in Chicago, she knew Patricia was probably sitting in her new apartment, feeling the same strange mix of terror and freedom. Marcus and Vivian were probably talking about their future building plans on truth instead of illusion. Other people she'd touched, accidentally influenced, were questioning their own row 14s, their own acceptance of less than they deserved. Eleanor Hartley, retired teacher from the South Side, had started a quiet revolution simply by refusing to stay invisible. And that she thought as she fell asleep beside her husband of 2 months and love of 50 years was enough, more than enough, everything that mattered.